Chapter 113. Ah! Roaring to the sky, Tangin's eyes were blood red, and his face was extremely ferocious. Waves of crazy killing intent filled his mind, and because he couldn't vent it, they collided with each other, giving him a splitting headache. At this time, another voice kept echoing in his mind. Kill, kill, kill. In an instant, the colors in Tang-Un's vision faded like the tide, and were replaced by a dark red color. The sky was blood red, the leaves were blood red, and the people were blood red. Boom! There was a loud noise in his mind, as if something was broken, and he suddenly felt refreshed. Tang-In looked up. The Knight of Light who attacked first was a little scared by Tang-In's stare. The spear in his hand was caught, and he couldn't stab it or pull it back. The two knights next to him saw that the situation was not right, and quickly stabbed with their spears. Thump, thump, the two spears stabbed into the trunk. Be careful, the holy knight on the side suddenly exclaimed. An owl-like laughter. Unknowingly, Tang-In had already flashed behind the first knight to attack like a ghost, and his dented dagger was already pressed against the knight's neck. You dare! Stop! The surrounding knights were shocked and quickly surrounded him, either threatening or comforting him. Tang-In laughed strangely twice, slowly scratching the knight's neck with his dagger, and then whispered in his ear, Are you afraid of death? The knight who was held hostage forced himself to be calm. No. You're more powerful than me. I'm very afraid of death. Tang-In raised his head with a blank expression. Once a person dies, it's like falling into a pitch-black space. It's quiet inside, and there's nothing. No one talks to you. No one pays attention to you no matter how you shout. You can only stay there forever. How do you know? Because I have died before. It's over. This guy is not crazy, right? You don't believe me? I will send you there to experience it. Well, maybe you can also transmigrate. Transmigrate? No. A knight with quick reaction screamed. Chi! Blood spurted out from the knight's neck like a thin curtain. Damn it, kill him. The holy knight was enraged and charged forward with his spear. Come on, all of you. Tang-In licked his lips crazily as he watched the blood-red bodies rushing towards him one after another. This color isn't red enough. At this moment, Tang-In was like a completely different person, bloody and crazy. The two knights who were closest to Tang-In were the ones who had missed their target earlier. Seeing that their companion had died, the two of them roared angrily. Their two spears intertwined and twisted towards Tang-In. Instead of retreating, Tang-In advanced, cutting into the spear like a phantom. Die! The two of them were overjoyed and quickly twisted their spears. Bang! The long spears collided smoothly, but the figure within had disappeared. Suddenly, a red light shone in front of him. Chi, 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 chi. In the narrow space between the two of them, countless red lines crisscrossed. The armor on their bodies broke inch by inch like cardboard, and blood spurted out like a fountain. Ha! Crazy and ear-piercing laughter. Tang-In's figure appeared between the two of them. He opened his arms and welcomed the baptism of the blood rain, as if he was on a pilgrimage. Whoosh! The pale-faced holy knight rushed forward and blasted his spear towards Tang-Un's head. Taking a step to the left, Tang-In tilted his head to avoid the swift spear. Then, his figure suddenly rushed forward. People who used spears were afraid of being attacked at close range. The holy knight's reaction was also quite fast. He quickly dragged his spear and counterattacked, shaking off 3 spear flowers. Ding, ding, ding. The sparks flickered, and the collision sounds were short and fierce. The two of them were fighting fast, as if they wanted to compete in reaction and hand speed. However, in an instant, the holy knight retreated, and Tang-In closed in step by step. In a few breaths, the attack range of the spear was quickly nibbled away by the dagger. In the end, it could no longer be used. The holy knight's face was extremely ugly. Although the first retreat was also because he couldn't bear it, it was more because he wanted to temporarily avoid the dagger and increase the attack range advantage of the spear. Who would have thought that one step back would lead to another step back, and the situation instantly collapsed. The holy knight was also a veteran. Seeing this, he directly threw his spear and waved his hand to pull out the knight sword at his waist. Kiki, Tang in leaned sideways to avoid the spear and closed in. Before the holy knight could swing his sword to attack, a flower of blood suddenly bloomed in front of him. The bloody sword light that had been suppressed to the limit was blasted out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The holy knight was shocked. He tried his best to wave his sword in order to take less damage. However, it was obvious that this method was futile. The sword fell into the complicated sword light and was instantly crushed. Damn it! The other holy knight could not save him in time. He quickly swung his spear thunder at Tang Un's back in order to make him hesitate and not have time to be ruthless. Huh! With a chuckle, Tang In flashed behind the holy knight like a ghost and waved his hand. Bang! A round thing was thrown at the spear that was coming from behind. No! The holy knight, who came later, was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He wanted to forcefully withdraw his spear. However, it was impossible for him to withdraw an attack that had been thrown out with all his might. Bang! The holy knight's head exploded when his combat aura touched it. Ah! The holy knight looked up to the sky and howled. He could not speak his grief and indignation. You devil! I'll fight you to the death. Kiki. What answered him was a series of strange laughter. Then, Tang In suddenly accelerated and rushed toward the holy knight who was standing at the side, hesitating. No! Dodge, dodge quickly! The holy knight was shocked and quickly followed behind Tang In. The huge commotion finally alerted Lancelot and Sylvia, who were fighting fiercely. Sylvia took the time to look back and saw that the assassin who was injured by her earlier was running as if nothing had happened. Then, the silhouette quickly disappeared into the holy light nights, and immediately there was a bloody storm. How is that possible? Sylvia was shocked. She was sure that she had injured him severely. Even if it was just a momentary recovery before death, how could he increase his combat strength out of thin air? Sylvia's eyes were sharp. Although Tang Un's attack was the same as before, such as the red lines that appeared from time to time, the ghostly figure, and the blood-like sword gleam, the feeling that it gave off was completely different. It was more reasonable, smooth, and elegant. Of course, Sylvia knew what this feeling was. It was a kind of absolute control of the rhythm of the battle. If a martial artist had this ability, he would be considered to have touched the real threshold of martial arts. This ability was not something that could be learned through long-term training or step-by-step teaching. It was a flash of inspiration that could only be obtained through hundreds of battles. Of course, there were geniuses who were born with this talent. For example, Sylvia in front of them. Ha! Knight's flower. If you don't go now, your subordinates will all be killed. Lancelot, who was covered in wounds, mocked. Sylvia scoffed and waved her spear to shatter the sword gleam that was sneaking towards her. Holy Light Knights, listen up. Go and support them now. Remember, be careful and just hold them back. Yes, the 4 Holy Light Knights who were attacking Lancelot jumped out of the battle circle and quickly rushed over. Sesman was standing aside and casting a spell. Tang In's movements were too slippery. Now that he was in the crowd, he did not dare to act rashly. The only Holy Light Knight could not catch up with Tang In. He could only watch as Tang In tortured his companions one after another. It was really torture. When the red lines intersected, they did not cut the vital parts. Instead, they cut the arteries, causing blood to gush out. The Abyss Devil, on the other hand, was pacing back and forth with a look of enjoyment. Not long after, the black robe was completely dyed red. God of Light, how could you allow such a heretic to walk in the world? The remaining Holy Light Knights' fighting spirit had completely collapsed. They were running around like deserters on the battlefield. Some of them were not afraid of death, but this did not mean that they were willing to be a fountain of human bodies. Fortunately, the Holy Light Knights who came to the rescue arrived and blocked Tang In's attack. With Sylvia's reminder and the tragic situation on the ground, the Holy Light Knights did not dare to be careless. A few of them raised their spears and attacked together. They did not want to be successful, but they did not want to make any mistakes. Under such passive offense and active defense, Tang En's journey of slaughtering people finally came to a halt. At this moment, something happened on Sylvia's side. As soon as the Holy Light Knights left, Lancelot finally found a chance to escape. After all, he was a beginner Earth-level martial artist who was agile and agile. As long as Sylvia had not leveled up to a Void-level martial artist, it would be very difficult for her to stop him alone. After taking a hit from Sylvia's heavy spear, Lancelot spat out blood and retreated. He jumped off the cliff while laughing maniacally. Let's go, let's go. It's an honor to have the Knight's Flower send me off twice. Ha! Oh yeah, thank you, brother. If we meet again in the future, Lancelot will definitely repay you. An eagle screeched from outside the cliff. Of course, Lancelot was talking about Tang En. He did not think that Tang En was one of them like Sylvia and the rest did. However, before he could finish his sentence, Tang En had already rushed into the dense forest and ran down the mountain. He had no choice. The 5-minute skill time was almost up. If he wanted to leave, the Holy Light Knights could not stop him. However, Sylvia and Sessman would not let him go. It could be said that if it were not for Tang En today, none of the cultists would have been able to leave. One of them walked down the path they came from. The other flew down the mountain quickly, preparing to surround Tang En. Sessman, who had the fly skill, was naturally faster. However, there was more than one exit on the mountain. In the end, he met Sylvia, who was in a hurry. The two of them looked at each other. Unfortunately, damn it. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 114. In the afternoon, on a nameless mountain in the north, a group of people were lazily lying on the slope of the mountain, basking in the winter sun. Judging from their facial features, their clothes, and the thick-backed machetes, short-handled axes, large hammers, and other weapons, it wasn't hard to tell that these people should be businessmen. Boss, let's change to another place. We haven't seen anyone here for a long time. A bored, skinny man tilted his head and said. There was a middle-aged man lying there with a murderous look on his face. Be patient. Besides, where can we change to? We can go to a place closer to the main road. There are more people there. You're looking for death. The middle-aged man said bluntly. The competition is so fierce now. Which good place is not occupied? Besides, with our strength, we'll definitely be taken advantage of if we go there. We're not strong enough now. The middle-aged man sighed, but then he said, but don't look down on this place. Although there's less business here, it's safe. Hey, didn't you easily rob a father and daughter looking for their family a few days ago? Didn't you have fun with that girl? Damn, I told you to watch her closely. Watch her closely. You even let her commit suicide. Otherwise, wouldn't you make a lot of extra money by selling her? Boss is right. The skinny man smiled wretchedly. I really hope we can do it again. Before he could finish speaking, suddenly, Boss, someone's coming. A bandit at the top of the mountain shouted. The middle-aged man was happy at first, but then he scolded. Damn, calm down. How many people are there? Only one. She's wearing red. I think she's a girl. Oh, she's here. The skinny man was wild with joy. The group of bandits around him also became spirited. They clustered around the middle-aged man and walked to the top of the mountain. He stuck his head out and looked into the distance. Sure enough, a passerby in red was walking slowly on the mountain road. Good. I didn't wait for so long in vain. That doesn't seem right. She doesn't walk like a girl. Nonsense. Had you ever worn red clothes before? Amidst the constant arguing, the person in red gradually approached. Ordinary face, long and narrow eyes, flat body. Damn, it's really a man. The skinny man slammed the ground and scolded angrily. Is there something wrong with this person? All right. All you shut the F*CK up. The middle-aged man glared at them. F*CK, focus on robbing. This guy looks a bit strange. Let's attack him together. Soon, the man in red reached the center of the mountain path. His head was lowered, his footsteps were slow, and he looked absent-minded. Charge! Surround them. Under the command of the middle-aged man, the bandits split into two groups. They waved their weapons and rushed down the hill, blocking the man in red in the middle. During this time, The red-clothed man actually acted as if he did not hear anything and continued to slowly walk forward with his head lowered. This situation made the bandits, who were constantly shouting to increase their morale, feel puzzled. Usually, in such a situation, the passers-by who were robbed would panic and run around in all directions. The bandits looked at each other. Finally, the skinny man stood up and said impatiently, "Kid, I'm a robber. Hand over the money." F***CK. Did you hear that? If you piss me off, I'll take your life. Hey, stop right there. No matter how the skinny bandit called out, the man in red didn't respond. Huh? The middle-aged man behind him suddenly sniffed and scolded with a frown. F***CK. What's that smell? It stinks. F***CK. You're looking for death. No one paid attention to him. The skinny man felt that he had lost face. He pulled out his sword and walked toward the man in red. "Second brother, come back." The middle-aged man looked at the quiet man in red, and his heart trembled. He was very familiar with this feeling. It was the sign of danger every time he faced. The last time he had this feeling was when he met a single woman in a black robe. At that time, he resisted the urge to rob her and let her walk past him. Later, he heard that not long after she passed by his place, a group of bandits attacked her. The result was that they were all wiped out in an instant. It turned out that the woman in the black robe was actually a magician. "It's okay, boss." The skinny man waved his long sword carelessly. "Watch me kill this lunatic." After saying that, he took a step forward and suddenly swung his sword down. However, the red-robed man stopped in his tracks, and the long saber almost brushed against his clothes as it slashed down. The skinny bandit was stunned. Then he saw the man in red raise his head. "Hiss!" He gasped. The eyes of the man in red in front of him were actually scarlet red. Even though it was broad daylight and the sun was warm, the skinny bandit still felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. His whole body was cold. At this time, the man in red slowly raised his pale hand and slowly stretched it toward his neck. The skinny bandit's forehead was covered with beads of sweat. He really wanted to dodge and get as far away from the man in red as possible. However, his feet were rooted to the ground and he couldn't move. Soon, the man in red's cold hand touched the bandit's Adam's apple. With a simple twist, "Gotcha!" The surrounding bandits opened their mouths and stared blankly at the scene in front of them. What's going on? Why didn't the second-in-command dodge? The middle-aged man's eyes widened. He was the first to come back to his senses. He took a step forward and waved his hand, shouting, "Brothers, chop him to death and avenge your second brother." The bandits heard the order and subconsciously rushed forward. No one noticed that their boss was slowly retreating. After dozens of bandits all rushed forward, the middle-aged man turned around and ran without hesitation. The mountain path was naturally full of twists and turns and was very complicated. The middle-aged man ran to the first bend and looked back, only to see waves of blood suddenly rushing to the sky, and miserable screams could be heard incessantly. The middle-aged man quivered and didn't dare to look anymore. He ran forward with his head lowered. Huff! Huff! After half an hour of running, the middle-aged man was so tired that he almost collapsed on the ground. Huff! He let out a long breath and shook his head. Damn, it wasn't easy to form a team. Damn it, that damn second brother didn't go. He didn't go. He killed me. After panting for a moment, the middle-aged man straightened up and looked left and right. Just now, he was only focused on running. He really didn't know where he was now. Hey, Chem, what's that smell? The middle-aged man suddenly stopped and turned his head stiffly. He saw a man in red standing quietly behind him. It seemed that he had been there for a long time. The color of his red clothes became brighter and the smell of blood rushed to the nose. The man in red slowly stretched out his hand. Night rain, a flat area in the mountains in the north. Battle cries, screams, and the clashing of swords. Under the curtain of rain, two groups of people fought fiercely. In the center of the flat area, many carriages surrounded the city in a circle. In the circle, there were large boxes of goods piled up. In addition, there were some people dressed as merchants with nervous expressions. There is no doubt that this caravan was unlucky to have been targeted by a large bandit group. Now, they could only count on these hired mercenaries to defeat this group of bandits. However, based on the current situation, it wasn't optimistic. They were already surrounded. If this continued, there was an 80 to 90% chance that they would be surrounded and annihilated. At this time, outside the battlefield, in the southeast of the mountains, a man in red slowly walked over. His head was lowered, as if he didn't see the fierce battle in front of him. The drizzle fell on his body and turned into streaks of red water dripping down from his sleeves. In front of him, there were a few men in armor riding on horses. They were observing the situation in front of them. From time to time, they would whisper and send people to adjust the direction of the attack. It was obvious that they were the leaders of this bandit group. As the man in red walked closer, a guard beside the bandit leader unintentionally turned his head and saw him. He was shocked and quickly reported. The bandit leader turned his head in surprise and looked up and down at the man in red. This was obviously not a mercenary who was here to ambush the leader. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so slow. After a few glances, the bandit leader lost interest. He turned his head and casually waved at the guard. The guard nodded and rode his horse to charge at the man in red. The bandit leader didn't say to kill, but he also didn't say to not kill. He had more important things to worry about. Of course, he didn't need to deal with such a small matter. Therefore, he waved his hand to mean, "I'll leave it to you." That guard decisively executed this act of convenience to kill. Bandits, could it be that he would politely ask others to watch from the side? The horse galloped quickly, approached, and swung his sword sideways. Swish, the Zamadeo drew a line of water and casually slashed at the man in red's neck. It could be said that this guard's horse skills were quite good. In such a dark environment, moving at high speed and swinging his sword quickly while maintaining accuracy, it was really not easy. Hiss! Bang! The war horse neighed, and its huge body suddenly fell, splashing water everywhere. The guard on the horse had already jumped out and stood up. Looking at the man in red in front of him, he gulped. The man in red inexplicably dodged his sword just now. Then he casually pressed his hand on the horse, and the horse flew a few feet away. Looking at the man in red walking forward, the guard gritted his teeth and shouted, "Leader, be careful." Then he flew forward and slashed at the man's head. Crackle. Lightning flashed past. The man in red looked up. His blood-red eyes were blurred and terrifying. The guard's body stiffened, and then he felt a pain in his wrist. His long sword was taken away. Then a line of water slid down his neck. His vision spun and shook and gradually turned dark. When the bandit leader turned his head, the man in red was already in front of him with his long sword, and his guards were standing in the rain behind him. It was a part of the guards because their heads had rolled to God knows where. Thud, 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 the long sword was unsheathed, and a group of guards beside the bandit leader rode their horses and rushed over. The man in red moved, and unlike his previous slow movement, his body flashed like a ghost. The long sword was strangely held in his hand, and a long red line was drawn diagonally in his hand. Hiss! The guard in front and his horse were cut diagonally. Because the speed was too fast, a blood curtain was still connected. Whoosh! A figure spun and rushed out of the blood curtain, over the guard's head, and landed behind the bandit leader. The bandit leader's face was gloomy. He patted the horse's back and jumped up to meet the man in red. Clang, clang, bang! The long sword in the man's hand shattered, and his body was sent flying into the air. Ah! The bandit leader laughed and landed on the horse's back. At the same time, his sword was filled with black fighting energy, waiting for the man to land and cut him in half. The rising man in red spread his arms, raised his head, and opened his mouth, allowing the rain to wash over him. His momentum was exhausted, and his body stopped. Crackle! Another bolt of lightning appeared in the sky. The bandit leader narrowed his eyes and seemed to see the man in red tumbling in the air. In an instant, the light disappeared. Whoosh! The bandit leader looked in disbelief at the four figures that suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, the four red lights approached him silently. His temple, his forehead, his throat, and his heart. So fast. How could it be Before the bandit leader could determine which figure was real, he felt a pain in his chest. He looked down and saw a pitch-black dagger piercing through his chest. Then it twisted up. He screamed and fell off his horse. Perfect air kill. Soon, just as the merchants and mercenaries inside were about to lose hope, the attacking bandits seemed to have suddenly lost their command and became extremely disorganized. Then they stopped attacking and shouted something in panic. The rain was too heavy, and the people inside could not hear clearly. They could only vaguely hear that someone had died. Just as the mercenaries were hesitating whether this was a trap, the bandits suddenly broke down and scattered. In the blink of an eye, all of them were gone. The merchants and mercenaries looked at each other. What was going on? Hey, there's someone here. Wow, so smelly. He's still alive. Let me see. Done? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 115. Winter always came early in the north. The sun had been warm a few days ago, but after a night of rain, the temperature had dropped sharply, and now there was a bone-chilling wind. Animals knew to hibernate in their caves during this season, not to mention humans. But in this world, there would always be people who were homeless and had nowhere to hide from the cold. For example, the people in the valley before them. This was a rather hidden, small valley, surrounded by mountains on all sides. The winding mountain road was the only way in and out of here. Many towering trees grew at the slightly low valley floor, but some had already been sawed, leaving only bare tree stumps. If you went further in, you would understand what those sawed trees were for. This was a group of simple wooden houses with people walking around and talking from time to time. At first glance, it looked like a small, self-sufficient farm. At the back of the wooden houses, there was a boy and a girl, two children chasing each other. The boy was running, and the girl was angrily chasing after him, probably because he had pulled her braid or something. In just a moment, the two children had run to the back of the wooden houses. There was a mountain wall here, a dead end. The boy was forced into a corner by the girl, and the two narrowed their eyes and stretched out their small hands to grab and hit each other. After fooling around for a while, the two finally got tired, so they sat back to back. Phew! Tom, I'm warning you, don't grab my hair again. Otherwise, I won't let you off next time. The little girl pouted. Helen, I've said it many times, I didn't do it. Maybe it was Jared who did it. The boy smiled slyly, looking like he would rather die than admit it. Liar, it was you, I saw it all. Wow, my mom said that children who lie will turn their mouths into sausages. Oh, Tom, you're going to turn into a sausage mouth. Little Helen gloated. Little Tom looked a little flustered and stubbornly said, Your mom was lying to you. It wouldn't be like that. After saying that, he secretly touched his lower lip. It won't. The two argued loudly for a while, as if whoever had the higher decibel was right. In this regard, the girl undoubtedly had an innate talent. Her shrill voice completely suppressed the boy's voice. I will. Ugh. The high decibel sound was blocked by little Tom's mouth. Haha, if I touch you, you will also become a sausage mouth. Little Helen blinked her eyes. Her mouth puffed up, and sparkling teardrops fell. Why are you crying? Little Tom was a little flustered. Worst comes to worst, I won't infect you. Boo-hoo, you bullied me. I'm going to tell Mom. Hey, don't cry. Little Tom quickly grabbed Helen's arm. I'll take responsibility. Sob. You really will take responsibility? Woo. Of course, I'm not a 3 or 4-year-old kid. What if you lied to me? Tom looked around and immediately pointed at the cave on a mountain wall. If I lie to you, I will be eaten by the demonic beasts inside. Little Helen was startled and looked at the cave with a bit of fear. The demonic beasts inside are very terrifying. And I believe you. Phew, that's good. Little Tom was obviously relieved. Little Helen was still looking at the cave at this moment and said timidly, Have you seen the demonic beast's appearance? I only heard its voice a few times. It's very scary. It's just like the sound of the wolf that was killed by Uncle Darren. Little Tom looked at the cave with a bit of fear but he still puffed out his chest. I haven't seen it, but my father has. My father even made a few chains and sent them in just to tie up this demonic beast. After a pause, the boy said in a low voice, I eavesdropped on my father and heard him say that this demonic beast looks like a human, but its eyes are very red, just like a rabbit's eyes, and it will glow at night. Rabbit! Little Helen tilted her head and thought of a person with a rabbit's head, and then thought of this rabbit's head opening its three-petaled mouth and revealing two big white teeth to eat Tom. Her body trembled. It's indeed very scary. Hey, Tom, Helen, what are you two doing here? A pleasant voice came from behind the two. The two turned their heads, and when they saw the person, they immediately pounced over happily. Hello, big sister Shay. Hello, a handsome face with a gentle smile. It was the familiar Josiah. Little Helen's face was in Josiah's hand. We were just talking about the demonic beast inside. Demonic beast? Josiah said in surprise. Yes, the one with red eyes that glow. Tom gestured as if it was something serious. Josiah touched his forehead and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He's not a demonic beast, he's a human. He's big sister Josiah's friend. Someone she knows. Oh, the two nodded as if they didn't fully understand. All right, I'm going in. Go back and have breakfast, Josiah said with a smile. Goodbye, big sister Shay. The two children said in unison. Goodbye. Waving his hand, Josiah walked into the cave. Big sister Josiah is so beautiful. It would be great if I could be like her when I grow up. Little Helen crossed her arms in front of her chest, full of longing. You will definitely be. All right, let's go back. Otherwise, I'll be beaten by Dad again, Tom urged. Thus, the two children walked hand in hand towards the wooden huts. With a groan, Tang In slightly opened his eyes. He had a splitting headache, and his throat felt like it was on fire. There was no place on his body that didn't hurt. Where was this? The first thing he saw was a gray stone roof. When he turned around, he saw thick stone walls everywhere except in front of him. Voila! Lowering his head, Tang In saw that his wrists were tied with a thick iron chain, and the other end of the iron chain was fixed to the stone wall. His legs were also tied with an iron chain. This is... Tang In sank into deep thought. Oh, I came to assassinate Sessman. Then, I met another group of people who also wanted to kill Sessman. Was it called the Barbarian God Church? While they were fighting, I tried to assassinate them. Oh, I was blocked by Sylvia. This woman, TSK. Then, I followed them for another month until I climbed a mountain. When they fought again, I took the opportunity to shoot a demon-piercing arrow to shatter Sessman's magic shield. Then, I tried to kill him with my dagger, but it was blocked by Sylvia again. I went up to kill them. Thinking of this, Tang In couldn't help but shake his head. Tang In, what were you thinking at that time? Sigh, I was too impatient. In the end, I was blinded by hatred. Then, all the skills that I was proud of were easily defeated. I didn't even have time to use the storm skill that I just learned. In the end, I used Ghost Body, and then this... Tang In scratched his head, which suddenly hurt. What happened next? Why was it blank? I seem to have killed a lot of people, right? Did I kill Sessman? Phew! After the pain passed, Tang In let out a long sigh of relief and looked at the chain on his hand. So was I caught. Tap, tap, tap. Tang In suddenly raised his head and looked at the passage in front of him. The sound of footsteps approached. Then, a heroic-looking woman in a white robe turned around. Josiah, Tang In cried out involuntarily. Hey, Tang, you're awake. Josiah said in surprise, but then her face turned cold. Did you save me? Josiah said coldly. I suggested to bring you back, but I don't know if I saved you or not. Tang In finally realized that Josiah's expression was not right. Then, he guessed the reason and smiled helplessly. Well, what do you think? You want to hand me over to the police? You finally admit it? You're a hateful liar, a filthy murderer. Josiah's face turned red as she angrily rebuked him. Liar? Did I lie to you? Tang In spread his hands. Besides, I've killed a lot of people. Which one are you talking about? Shameless, Josiah said angrily. I used to worship you. Why did you kill Betsy's two brothers? Did they have a grudge against you? Or did you just do it for money? If you're talking about these two, Tang Yin paused and then said, although Bess died in my hands, it was actually a suicide. I do regret going to his house that night. As for Bevan, I did kill him. I've never regretted killing him. Suicide? Josiah opened her mouth slightly and then shook her head. Betsy said she saw you kill her brother Bess with her own eyes. That bitch. Tang Yin's mouth twitched. Do you want to hear a story? Yes, a story about Ghostface. But remember to keep it a secret. Josiah looked suspiciously at Tang Yin. You still want to lie to me? Well, tell me first. Tang Yin smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then he picked out some of the contents of Bess's diary and told it to Josiah. Ghostface is Bess. How was that possible? Josiah was tongue-tied. I left the diary on Bevan's desk. I guess Count Robert took it away or burned it. This matter is very serious. If it is exposed, it will be a heavy blow to the Robert family. So Betsy shouldn't have seen it. Josiah was silent. After a while, she said, Okay, I'll believe you for now. What about Bevan? He sent people to kill Bess. It's not about that. I'm not familiar with Bess. There's no need for me to stand up for him. Besides, Bess would never want to kill Bevan. Tang Yin shook his head and said, Bevan sent people to injure my friend. That's the reason I killed him. Just because he injured your friend? Tang Yin said calmly, That's right. Hee, I know what you want to say. I don't want to exaggerate my friend's injury. Well, as you can see, I'm an assassin. I don't know many friends in Lion City. She's one of the people I care about. Moreover, she saved me. So if someone touched her, I killed them. It's that simple. Right, you know my friend too. She's called Lena. Have you heard about her current situation? Lena? Which Lena? Josiah, who was about to refute, asked in shock. Do you know any Lena? She's the one who shouted with you. Josiah took a step back, his expression changing. So the person who gave the order to injure hundreds of civilians was Bevan? That's right. How could this be? Josiah muttered absent-mindedly. She pursed her lips and said, Then you were the one who paid for the civilians' demolition fees. It was convenient. Right? You haven't answered my question. How's Lena? She's fine. I asked my teacher to go to the church in the city and asked the high priest to treat her. Before Josiah could finish speaking, Tang Yin's expression suddenly changed. Red light gathered in his eyes. Clatter. Amidst the sound of chains, Tang Yin raised his hands to hold his head. Suddenly, a painful howl rang through the cave and spread out for miles. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 116. A dark space, rows of seats, and a white screen a few meters in front of you. Don't you find it familiar? Yes, that's right. It's a movie theater. However, this movie theater doesn't seem to be doing very well. There are only two people in the audience. One is an old butler holding a teapot. He doesn't seem to be interested in the content of the movie and is just casually watching it. The other young man is much more serious. His long and narrow eyes are staring straight ahead. From his constantly changing expression, it is obvious that he is very immersed in the movie. From the scene shown on the screen, this movie should be an action movie. Yes, the fight is very intense, and the scene is very bloody. The acting of the extras is also very good. Look at the painful expression, look at the technique of spurting blood, look at the head flying out. Well, in short, everything is very professional. Acting in this kind of movie, this life is worth it. Let's look back at the movie itself. The main content is about a seriously crazy young man walking through a barren mountain and passing through a valley. In the end, he is robbed and killed. Sigh, the world is so cold. Such a young man actually has the heart to do this? It is a sin. Fortunately, this young man is brainless but not mentally disabled. He calmly attacks and neatly kills the robbers and then leaves. This realistic shooting, these strong actors, this method of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, this counterattack, and other methods that the masses love to see, It has to be said that this is really a great movie. Look, even the main character himself has a face of inconceivable shock. This was all done by me? Tang In stared blankly at the old butler beside him. Yes. Why don't I remember? The old butler calmly explained. Once the ghost body skill is used, your body will be controlled by your killing intent. Your battle state will increase by 1 level. Everyone who shows killing intent towards you will be treated as a target. After 5 minutes of skill time is up, the status will disappear and your strength will return to normal. However, the killing intent in your mind will need some time to disperse. During this time, you will still be controlled by your killing intent. Understand? While talking with Josiah just now, Tang only felt a surge of blood and a splitting headache. Then just now, it was because my killing intent didn't disperse completely. Fortunately, no one showed killing intent towards him, so after a while, he returned to normal. The old butler nodded. Tang and was silent for a moment, and then said, "What would have happened if Josiah hadn't saved me this time? Keep walking until the murderous aura in your head dissipates. Or you will exhaust your energy." Tang In smacked his lips. He imagined himself walking aimlessly in the wilderness and eventually fainting in an unknown ditch. If any carnivorous beast passed by at that time, isn't this skill harmful? The truth is, if it wasn't for this skill, you would have already died under the cavalry spear. The old butler continued. I need to remind you that this skill can be upgraded. The more people you kill with this skill, the more powerful it becomes. Of course, the after effects will be even more serious. You have to know that yourself. What's there to be confident about? Tang could not help but swear. He was scared. Who the hell would use this skill in the future? The old butler curled his lips, as if he disdained to express his opinion. The reaction time of the ghost body skill was not something that could be avoided by hiding in the system space. Thus, it did not take long for Tang In to be forcefully pulled back to reality. What followed was a strong desire to kill, accompanied by intense pain. Damn it! Another long howl reverberated through the area. For the next week or so, Tang In spent his time in the cave. After that conversation, Josiah was probably quite shocked. Thus, she only came to visit Tang In a few days later. She seemed to have figured out some issues. Her attitude towards Tang In had returned to how it was in the past. From time to time, she would ask him questions about democracy, freedom, and the like. Tang In did not know much about those things. Still, he had gone through an exam-oriented education. Under Josiah's questions, he was able to think of some points. Although he could not explain why, he was able to list out the specific structure of an organization. For example, this was used for legislation, this was used for supervision, and that was used for implementation. What kind of positions were there? What were the uses of these positions? Oh, and these 3 could not be interfered with. They had to operate independently. As for why it was like this, he would have to figure it out himself. Tang In's spittle flew everywhere, as if he was the marquis of thousands of years ago. Josiah's eyes lit up as she listened. She took out a small notebook and kept recording as if she had obtained a treasure. When Tang In's mouth was dry and he had nothing to say for the time being, Josiah then told him about her recent situation. Ever since she ran away from home that day, Josiah boarded a ship and came to the north. She began her journey to find the Gray Coat Army. Originally, a single woman like her was the favorite of the northern bandits. However, because she was a mage, the bandits who had designs on her ended very miserably. At first, when Josiah begged for mercy, she would still let the bandits go. Later, when she saw a group of bandits brutally killing an ordinary passerby, Josiah was angry. She waved her hand and shot an ice arrow to nail the bandits to death. After that, she did not hold back. As long as she saw them, she would kill them. Because she had been walking on remote paths, she had only encountered small thieves. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for her to exterminate them. She was lucky. Once, after she saved a mother and son, she passed by the Gray Coat Army. Coincidentally, she met the Gray Coat Army that was passing by. Thus, she happily ran over to join them. The Gray Coat Army was an organization that was not tolerated by the Brand Kingdom. Josiah rushing over so recklessly was naturally not accepted. Moreover, she was a noble mage. No matter how one looked at it, she seemed to have ulterior motives. Fortunately, the mother and son came over to testify and said what happened just now. The leader of the Gray Coat Army looked at Josiah, who was full of anticipation, and finally agreed to let her follow for the time being. After she passed the inspection, she would be allowed to join. After half a month of inspection, I have successfully joined the Gray Coat Army, Josiah said proudly. Not bad, not bad. What is the Gray Coat Army? Tang, you haven't heard of the Gray Coat Army? Josiah asked in surprise. No. Tang Yun's answer was very straightforward. After Josiah's introduction, Tang Yun finally understood what kind of organization the Gray Coat Army was. The other world implemented a complete aristocratic system. It was natural for the aristocrats to rule and manage the commoners. Of course, there were rights and obligations. However, when it came to actual operations, the aristocrats were only left with rights. Originally, as long as the commoners had food to eat, they would not cause any trouble. However, there were such aristocrats who exploited the commoners under their rule until nothing was left. When they could not even guarantee food and clothing, the commoners would naturally protest. The result of their verbal protest was physical harm. If any of them could not stand it and took action, it would be a bloody suppression. Many people could not tolerate such a result. Thus, an organization of resistance, the Gray Coat Army, was formed. The Gray Coat Army's initial idea was simple. It was to fight against the aristocrats and then obtain food to survive. After winning a few battles, they got what they wanted. At this time, more and more commoners came to join them. Thus, the Gray Coat Army gradually expanded. At this time, no aristocrats took them seriously. In the eyes of the aristocrats, they were just a bunch of unruly commoners who had a death wish. As the Gray Coat Army gradually expanded, they naturally needed more food. Thus, they took down a small city in the north. This was like poking a hornet's nest. The central army of the Brand Kingdom quickly spread out. Although they resisted with all their might, the Gray Coat Army was not as good as the Central Army in terms of equipment, strength, and combat quality. In the end, the city was breached. Except for a few who broke through, all the captured members of the Gray Coat Army were killed, including some leaders. After this battle, the Gray Coat Army was greatly weakened. It was also because of the lack of a leader. Thus, it was about to fall apart. At this time, a middle-aged woman called Rosa stood up. Rosa was the descendant of a fallen aristocrat. She was very knowledgeable. Previously, she had opposed the Gray Coat Army's attack on the city. However, the leader of the Gray Coat Army at that time did not listen to her advice. The commoners respected knowledgeable people. Thus, when Rosa took over the position of leader of the Gray Coat Army, no one objected. After Rosa became the leader, she led the Gray Coat Army to the mountains. Although the conditions were difficult, it was difficult for the Central Army of the Brand Kingdom to find them. Then, they used various methods to communicate to the outside world. For example, the commoners should be promoted. The commoners should have the same opportunity to study in the academy as the nobles. The most important thing was that the commoners should participate in politics. These words were very attractive to the commoners. Thus, the Gray Coat Army's image was very good among the commoners. Slowly, more and more people came to join them through introductions from the internal members of the organization. After a few years, the Gray Coat Army began to recover. Regarding this situation, the nobles of the Brand Kingdom hated them to the core. In the Mercenary Guild, the Thief Guild, and other assassination bounty lists, Rosa's name was always at the top. Other than targeting Rosa, the Central Army also spared no effort to eliminate the Gray Coat Army. Recently, the Gray Coat Army seemed to have received news that the Central Army was going to attack them. Thus, they broke up and hid in the mountains. The group that Josiah met was the group that was on their way to escape. So, it's a rebellion. Tang Yun looked strangely at the excited Josiah. What was this girl thinking? Ahem. Tang Yun cleared his throat and said, Josiah, are you sure you know what you're doing? I'm sure, Josiah said excitedly. I've been reading the book written by leader Rosa recently. I think what she said makes sense. The noble's rights should be limited. You don't sound like you're a noble. Tang pursed his lips and said, "This is a rebellion, a war. This is a reform." Josiah corrected him and then clenched her fists. "I'm not afraid of war. There's something I want to do here. This is the path I want to take." From their previous interactions, Tang found that Josiah did have this tendency. But now, her attitude was so firm that it was a little shocking. "Tang, the reform is very difficult. It'll take a long time. It could take 10, 50, 100 years, or even longer. So, we need more people to join us. Tang, your thoughts are the deepest I've ever seen. Some of them are even deeper than Leader Rose's. I hope that you can join the Gray Coat Army. Let's complete this reform together, okay?" With that, Josiah looked at Tang nervously. Tang touched his forehead and said softly, "Why does it feel like it's a blockbuster? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 117. Why does it sound like a promotion? What? Josiah asked in surprise. Nothing, Tang chuckled and said. The Gray Coat Army want assassins too. We don't care about that. Besides, there are good and bad assassins. You help the civilians of Lion City recover the demolition fee. This proves that you're a good person, Josiah said in a serious tone. Are you trying to give me a good person card? Tang could not help but curse silently. He then shook his head and said, "Sorry, I can't join the Gray Coat Army." "Oh, why not?" Josiah did not seem to be upset. It was obvious that he wanted to persuade him. "I came to the north to do something important, so..." "Something important?" Okay." Tang looked at Josiah's bright and suspicious eyes and spread his hands. "I'm here to kill." Josiah took a deep breath. "Tang, why would you rather kill than help the civilians?" "Sorry, I have a reason to kill him." After a moment of silence, Josiah suddenly blinked and said, "You've assassinated before, right?" "Yes." "And the result?" Tang rolled his eyes and pointed at himself. "Do you still need to say it?" "Huh." Josiah chuckled and said, "Tang, you should be very good at assassinating." It's not good to say this myself." "Then forget it. Your assassination failed, which means that the other party is better than you. Or the other party's power is stronger than yours, right?" Tang raised his eyebrows and did not say anything. Sessman, his shield was stronger than him. As for power, the Temple of Light was needless to say. Sylvia alone was enough to beat him up. Josiah took it as Tang's acquiescence. He continued, "Since you can't defeat him for the time being, why don't you accumulate your strength first?" "Yes, I saved your life. Can't you help me?" Tang sighed helplessly. "Miss, these are two different concepts. I'm very grateful that you saved me, but you can't force me onto the path of rebellion because of this." "Reform," Josiah corrected him with a smile. "All right, reform. How about this? Tell me if there's anyone you don't like, and I'll help you deal with him right now. Just take it as me repaying your kindness. How about that?" "I don't like anyone." Josiah shook his head and tilted his head. "You really don't want to help me?" Sorry, yes." Josiah pursed his lips and nodded. His face flushed red. "You don't have to repay me for saving your life. But don't you have an explanation for what you've done to me?" Hey, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. What did I do to you?" Tang touched his nose and asked in confusion. Josiah bit his lips and took a deep breath. "That night, I was bathing. The first snow of the year 555 in the north of Brand Country came earlier than the previous years. The ancient towering trees had long lost their splendor. The jagged white bones were trying their best to support the snowflakes. It was a beauty of hardship. Here, that's where we're staying for the time being. This place is surrounded by mountains. Normal people can't find this place. We have a total of 500 people here. About 100 of them are women and children, and the remaining 400 are young adults. A few days ago, Uncle Darren brought 100 people out to look for food. Oh, Uncle Darren is the leader of this group." The fragmented narration came from a young girl in a thick white cotton jacket who was trying her best to climb the mountain. Beside her was a young man in a long robe with a helpless expression. Needless to say, these two people were Josiah and Tangen. You don't have to tell me so much. I haven't joined you guys yet. I only said that I'll consider it. Josiah acted as if he didn't hear anything. He stepped onto a platform and turned to look at the white snow. He said with a little distress, "Winter is not good. We're short of food now. I don't know if Uncle Darren and the rest can solve this problem." Tang rolled his eyes and didn't say anything. "Sorry, Tang. I was too worried." Josiah came back to his senses and stuck out his tongue. Tang shrugged and said, "It's okay. How did you solve this problem in the past?" "I heard from Uncle Darren that the Central Army wouldn't attack us at this time in the past. They wouldn't be willing to come out in such cold weather. That way, we could use money or wild animals to buy some rice in the city. But we can't do that now." Tang nodded and comforted him. "Don't worry. There will be a way to solve this problem." "I hope so. Let's go. We should go back. Otherwise, if you suddenly want to jump off the cliff, I won't be able to stop you." Josiah smiled. The corner of Tang's mouth twitched. He turned around and walked down the mountain speechlessly. After the conversation that day, for some reason, Tang decided to stay in the Gray Coat Army for the time being. At this time, most of the murderous intent in his mind had dissipated. It would only explode when it was close to noon. According to the old butler's deduction, there were at most 2 more days before his murderous intent completely dissipated. Therefore, Josiah dragged him around on normal days. The people in the Gray Coat Army were very respectful to Josiah, a magician. Therefore, they were also very polite to him, a former demon beast. To be honest, Tangen was not very interested in the Gray Coat Army. If it wasn't for the fact that Josiah's reason couldn't be rejected, he would have left after the reaction time of the ghost form skill had passed. Now that he agreed to stay, it didn't matter. Anyway, his current plan was to find a place to train his skills. It didn't matter where he trained. Not long after the two of them walked down the valley, a burst of hearty laughter suddenly sounded. "Hey, it's Uncle Darren." Josiah hurriedly ran toward the wooden houses. Tang followed behind him. The wooden houses were more lively now. There were a few simple wooden carts in the empty space in the middle. There were some wild animals like wild boars and rabbits piled up on them. 2 people stood beside the carriage. One was a burly man with a black beard. The hearty laughter just now came from him. The other was a handsome young man with a tall and straight figure. "Ah, Uncle Darren. Hey, isn't this our respected mage Josiah?" Uncle Darren said jokingly as he bowed. Although his tone was teasing, one could still hear the respect he had for a mage. Uncle Darren, you're here again." Josiah pouted and returned the greeting helplessly. Hello, Josiah." The young man at the side came up to greet him. Then he flicked his wrist, and a cold blue flower appeared. "Here, this is for you. I happened to see it on my way back." "Thank you, Borg," Josiah replied with a smile as he casually kept the flower. Then she stepped to the side and gave way to Tang, saying, "Let me introduce him to you. This is Arthur." Arthur, this is Uncle Darren and Borg." Tang had told Josiah before that when introducing him to others, they had to call him Arthur. "Hello." Tang bowed. "Haha, hello." Uncle Darren suddenly raised his thumb and said, "Brother Arthur, you have great skills. When we saved you back then, you suddenly woke up. None of us here could control you. Luckily, you fainted later on. Otherwise, we really wouldn't know what to do." Tang touched his nose and said, "Accident. It was purely an accident." Elvis Borg sends his greetings." Borg bowed slightly, then smiled and said, "Brother Arthur and Miss Josiah know each other." "Hello." Yes, we used to be friends." Tang returned the greeting. Oh, no wonder. After a short exchange of greetings, it was obvious that Darren and the rest had something to discuss. So, Tang quickly bade farewell and walked towards his cave. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 118. The camp in the valley was built temporarily, so everything was very simple and crude. Most of the wooden houses were made of wooden planks, and there were also some tables and chairs. Of course, because there was an abundance of wood, every household had a brazier that crackled and burned for heating. At this moment, Josiah, Darren, Borg, and a middle-aged woman were sitting in a house and discussing something. It could be said that these few people were the leaders of this small group. The middle-aged woman was Megan, who was in charge of logistics. Josiah was currently learning from her. Originally, a person who had just joined would not be qualified to participate in such a meeting. However, Josiah's identity as a magic caster was not to be ignored, so Darren still brought her along. Of course, such a small meeting did not require any strict procedures. Darren rubbed his palms on the brazier and asked Megan with a smile, "How much food do we have left now?" The biggest problem for this group was the lack of food. Therefore, as long as they gathered, the first thing they would talk about was food. Megan shook her head and said, "Not much. Even if you add in the wild animals that you have hunted for the past few days, we will not last more than a week." Darren frowned and slammed his palms and said, "Damn. Ugh, these damn Central Army. Instead of guarding against the northern wilderness, they're fooling around here." Darren did not curse when he saw Josiah here. "Yes," Borg said. "According to Leader Rose's estimation, this time it should not be small. So be it. We have wasted so many years, so it is not a big deal. But now the food. Sigh, the normal wild animals are all hiding in the winter, and we do not dare to touch the large magical beasts. We can only harvest so little in a week. This method is not feasible." Darren sighed as he stroked his beard. At this point, everyone frowned, and the house was silent for a moment. Actually, the problem of food was a problem that the Gray Coat Army had been facing ever since they were established. The North was vast and sparsely populated. Logically speaking, there should be a lot of food. However, because the weather in the North was too cold, it was not suitable for plants to grow. Therefore, the production of food would never increase. In addition, the North was a place where there were frequent wars. Food had long become a military necessity and was monitored. The poor people worked hard all year round. After paying all kinds of taxes and being exploited by the nobles again, there was very little of the grain left. There was almost no grain left on the market. Only in the big cities would some grain merchants with connections transport grain from the south to trade. For a special group like the Gray Coat Army, it was common for them to be surrounded and annihilated, so they couldn't stay in one place for too long. Naturally, there was no need to talk about farming. As for going to the big cities to do business, it was fine during normal times. But in the current situation, it was undoubtedly impossible. After a while, Darren suddenly said, "Looks like that's the only way." Borg raised his eyebrows. "You mean?" Darren nodded his head heavily. Josiah and Megan looked at them in surprise. "Do you have a way?" Borg smiled at Josiah and replied, "When we were hunting, we saw a small supply team. Judging from their banners, they should be from the Ashen Flame Army, one of the 3 central armies at the front line. Are we going to rob military supplies?" Josiah and Megan were shocked. "Haha, that's right." Darren stroked his beard and grinned. "After being chased away for so long, we have to take back something." Josiah said hesitantly, "But these kinds of supplies will be accompanied by an army, right?" Borg nodded and said, "Yes. The one in charge of escorting them is an 800-man infantry team." "An 800-man infantry team?" Megan raised her voice. "We only have a combat power of 400, which is only half of the enemy's. Can we take them down?" "It's not that we don't have a chance," Borg said. "We've observed that the 800-man infantry team isn't an army that has been on the battlefield for hundreds of years. They should only be responsible for transporting supplies. As long as we succeed in ambushing them, we can immediately kill the infantry team leader. Then, we can destroy their morale with a single charge." Darren nodded and said, "That's right, and with our current situation, it's very difficult for us to hold on. It's rare to see a supply team with only 800 people. Since we've encountered it this time, we can't let it go." Everyone nodded. They didn't have much choice in the current situation. Darren saw that the other 3 had agreed, so he nodded and said, "All right, I roar." Just as Darren was about to announce that the decision was passed, a deafening roar suddenly rang out. Borg and Darren looked at each other in shock. Josiah and Megan seemed to be used to it. Josiah said, "This is Arthur." "Sorry, yes." He said that it won't be like this in one more day. "Arthur?" "Oh." Darren suddenly realized. Actually, when they first tied up Tang in, they had seen this roar. Josiah took the opportunity and said, "Arthur should also join the Gray Coat Army." "Yes, I'll be his referral." "Him?" Borg raised his eyebrows. "Yes, Mr. Arthur is very powerful. Yes, many of my ideas were taught to me by him. I believe that he will bring changes to the Gray Coat Army." Josiah seemed to have a lot of respect for Tang Un and spared no effort in recommending him. But his identity— Yes, sorry, Josiah. It's not that I don't believe him, but you know that the current situation is a little complicated. Borg shrugged. "That's why I said I'll be his referral. I'm very familiar with Arthur, so it won't be a problem," Josiah said firmly. Borg blinked and smiled. "All right, since Josiah is so sure, I'll agree to Brother Arthur joining. What about you guys?" Darren and Megan nodded at the same time. "Yay!" Josiah said excitedly. "Thank you, Uncle Darren, Auntie Megan, yes, and Borg." Borg waved his hand and said, "Don't be in a hurry to thank. Brother Arthur seems to be very skilled. The key to our ambush of the infantry team this time is to kill that captain as soon as possible. Why don't we let Brother Arthur do this?" He paused for a while and continued. "In this way, his identity will naturally not be a problem, and the other brothers will be convinced. I don't think that's a good idea. How can we let a newbie do this?" Darren said with a frown. Borg smiled and said, "I'm just giving a suggestion. It doesn't matter if we do it or not. Uncle Darren, it's fine. Borg is right." Josiah pursed his lips and said, "However, I have to discuss this with Arthur first." "I'm all right. Tell Brother Arthur not to force himself on this kind of thing," Borg consoled. "Yes." Josiah nodded. Since they had already decided to rob the food, the next step was to discuss the various details. For example, the other party's current position, the ambush location, etc. These things were mainly up to Darren and Borg to discuss. Hence, Josiah took his leave first and went to look for Tang Un. In the cave, Tang Un had already returned to normal. After hearing Josiah's words, he couldn't help but laugh. Isn't this a declaration of allegiance? Although he wasn't interested in joining the Gray Coat Army, since Josiah had asked, and Tang Un was also willing to help, he nodded in agreement. In the next few days, the Gray Coat Army began to be mobilized continuously. Those farmers who usually looked honest, actually were farmers, began to sharpen their weapons like machetes. The military equipment of this Gray Coat Army looked very shabby, and they usually only had a large sword by their side. In the entire army, only Darren and Borg had full body armor. Assassins were professionals when it came to blending into the environment. In just a few days, Tang Un was familiar with most of the Gray Coat Army members. He also understood some of the situation. Darren was the highest leader of this Gray Coat Army, and he seemed to have been a soldier and fought in wars before. After that, he left the army for some reason and entered the mercenary world, and finally came to the Gray Coat Army. After hearing this, Tang Un couldn't help but smack his lips. No matter how he heard it, it felt like he was going back in time. However, Darren's personality was very forthright, and he wasn't scheming. Every time he charged, he liked to be at the front. As for Borg, he used to be a noble like Josiah, and he was a viscount. However, it seemed like his family had done something that crossed the line and was found out by the Brand Kingdom's court and punished. In this world, there is no such thing as if the king wants the subject to die. The subject has no choice but to die. Borg's family immediately resisted, but of course they were suppressed in the end. However, at least they escaped. In desperation, the entire family joined the Gray Coat Army. This Borg grew up in an aristocratic school. He was smart and studious, and was one of the few outstanding second-generation nobles. In the aristocratic school, things like troop formations and war tactics were all taught. Borg used what he learned flexibly and won a few small-scale battles. He was obviously an outstanding tactical commander. Now, the tactics of this Gray Coat army were all from him. In 3 days, the Gray Coat army was fully prepared. Therefore, on that night, Tangin set off with this grain robbery team. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 119. The mornings in the north were extremely cold. With the lingering cold from the night before and the slight frost from the morning dew, people would not want to leave early. However, at this moment, in the humid mountains, a long troop was walking slowly on the mountain path. They were not thinking that the early bird would get the worm. It was just that they could not disobey military orders. In the middle of the troop, there were many carriages covered with tarpaulins. There was a small flag at the end of each carriage. There was a picture of a pale flame on it. Those who were familiar with the military of the brand would know that this was the symbol of the Ashen Flame Army. As for the troop in front of them, it was obviously the troop that delivered the supplies to the Ashen Flame Army. The troop was very long because they were walking slowly. However, the leader of the infantry troop did not turn around to scold them. It was already disgusting to wake up so early in the middle of winter. If he asked the disciplinary officer to discipline the soldiers, wouldn't it make the soldiers curse his mother in their hearts? Although the captain didn't care about the soldiers cursing his mother who had died many years ago, it was meaningless, wasn't it? The soldiers maintained a neat formation so that when the commander gave the order, they could attack and defend in an orderly and accurate manner. However, in this situation, was it necessary? Would there still be bandits who dared to rob the supplies of the Ashen Flame Army? The infantry captain yawned and couldn't help but curse in his mind. Damn it, these damn military officers are not reliable at all. They actually left out some of the supplies of the Blue Flame Legion. Isn't this harming people in the middle of winter? Sigh, the ones who suffer are always us runners. Leader, the terrain in front. Should we send some scouts to check it out first? Just as the leader of the infantry troop was complaining, a small leader came to ask for instructions. What did you say? The small leader had no choice but to repeat his question. The leader of the infantry troop looked up. It was a place that looked like a canyon. The walls on both sides were high and the path was in the middle. In the art of war, this was the most dangerous place. It was also the best place to set up an ambush. No wonder the small leader came to ask for instructions. No need, continue walking. The leader of the infantry troop waved his hand casually. What a joke. Once the soldiers stopped to rest, it would take a lot of effort to move them again. Yes. The captain took the order and left. There wasn't much anxiety on his face. He was just reminding them. Who would dare to rob military supplies? The team continued to move forward at their original speed. They did not know that there were people who dared to have designs on the military supplies. In the bushes on the mountain peak, ahead, a few people were watching the movement of the transport team. TSK, this idiot actually didn't send scouts to search the mountain? Uncle Darren, don't say that. This idiot saved us a lot of trouble. Without a doubt, these people were Darren and the others who had come to rob them. After speaking to Darren with a smile, Board turned to a burly man behind him and said, "Go and call everyone over. Remember, be gentle. Don't make any noise." The burly man nodded to show that he understood and retreated. The transport team is coming. I wonder if Brother Arthur is ready. TSK, I arranged a few people for him, but he rejected them. Can he do it alone? Darren looked around and asked softly. After arriving here last night, Tang In said that he was going to find the assassination location and then disappeared. Arthur will be fine. Josiah, who was very nervous because it was his first mission, still expressed his support for Tang In. I hope so, Board said calmly. After a while, the vanguard of the transport team started to enter the canyon. Meanwhile, the Gray Coat Army also quietly moved the ambush location forward. Board frowned. Is Brother Arthur still not going to make a move? Wait a while more. He will make a move. Josiah looked around nervously, hoping to find Tang Un. Darren held his sword with both hands tightly. It should be now. After a short while, the surroundings were silent. Tang In still did not make a move. At this moment, the transport team was about to reach the center of the canyon. No, we will miss the chance if we wait any longer. Borg raised his left hand. Instantly, the people around him slowly tightened their bows and pointed downwards. Of course, the bows of the Grey Coat Army were not standard goods. Most of them were made of cork. The arrows were also made of wood. Fortunately, there were blacksmiths in the Grey Coat Army, so the arrows could still be wrapped in a layer of metal. The range and damage of these bows were obviously far behind the standard military bows, but they were in a high position and were so close, so it was enough. On the other side, the first assault team, led by Darren, bent forward, waiting for the arrows to be released before they charged out. The first target of these two attacks was naturally the infantry captain on the horse. As long as he was killed, the outcome would be decided. Sigh, it seems like Brother Arthur is still lacking in courage. He needs to train, Borg said regretfully. Then, he waved his left hand. Josiah bit her lips and remained silent. She stared at the infantry captain. She really did not believe that Tang would be a deserter. Suddenly, a glimmer of light flashed across her eyes. Bang! The ground in front of the infantry captain's horse suddenly cracked open. Soil and rocks flew everywhere. Then, a black figure flashed onto the horse at lightning speed. In an instant, the infantry captain was stunned. Where did this person come from? The ground. Why did the ground crack open? One must know that the captain wasn't at the front of the group. There were still some scouts in front of him. But why was it that these soldiers were able to pass by safely, but when it was his turn, the ground suddenly cracked open? The infantry captain could not figure it out. Of course, he did not have the chance to figure it out. Following the figure was a terrifying red light. The infantry captain was stunned and did not react. Oh, he reacted a little. His hand subconsciously reached for the hilt of the sword at his waist. However, this did not stop the red light from entering through the gaps in his armor and disappearing into his throat. Then, the black figure stomped on the horse's head and used the momentum to pass through the mountain beside the road. It quickly disappeared into the dense forest. The soldiers of the transport team were stunned. Everything happened in the span of a breath. There was no time for them to react. The soldiers in front of the infantry captain did not even know that something had happened behind them. What kind of situation was this? Not to mention the soldiers. Even the Grey Coat Army who were mentally prepared were stunned. Darren's mouth was wide open. His body was still leaning forward. Who was that just now? Arthur? Borg's expression was not much better. He stared down with wide eyes, as if to confirm that what had just happened was not an illusion. In comparison, Josiah was much calmer. She was the first to discover Tang's unsurprised attack. Therefore, although she was surprised, she was more proud. Tang, you did not disappoint me. The warhorse neighed. Tang's kick was so powerful that the horse's head fell straight to the ground. Bang! The infantry captain's body was also thrown out. These two sounds woke everyone up. Damn it! A squad leader cursed and rushed forward to check on the captain's condition. Suddenly, whoosh, 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 the sky darkened. Arrows rained down like a torrential rain, completely enveloping half of the transport team. Enemy attack. Ugh. The squad leader who shouted was unlucky enough to be shot in the mouth by an arrow. He fell to the ground with his head raised. The mountain road was only so big. There was no cover at all. The soldiers who were running around frantically below became targets. The Grey Coat Army did not even need to aim. They only needed to shoot in the direction of the crowd. There was almost no possibility of missing. After a rapid round of arrow rain, the soldiers of the transport team suffered heavy casualties. Without waiting for them to catch their breath, kill! With a loud roar, Darren raised his greatsword and rushed out first. He used the gentle slope to charge down quickly. Behind him, more than 100 burly men also roared excitedly and rushed down with long swords. Some of the soldiers were cut down before they could react. Darren and the others who were charging quickly divided the transport team into two. Following that, the Grey Coat Army who had finished shooting arrows quickly changed to melee long swords and rushed down while shouting, forming a second charge. Don't panic. Counterattack with swords. Don't panic. A squad leader shouted at the top of his lungs, trying to gather his combat strength again. However, most of the soldiers were stunned. The army was defeated like a landslide and there were very few who responded. At this moment, bang, 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 a few ice arrows suddenly exploded on the shouting squad leader's body, directly flipping him to the ground. Magic, god of light, they have mages. Dozens of condensed soldiers looked at the squad leader who was covered in white frost and cried out in horror. Mages were really the dream of ordinary soldiers. With a high-level magic, 100 soldiers could die immediately. Of course, they did not know that Josiah was only a beginner mage. At this point, their morale had completely collapsed. The soldiers of the transport team gave up resisting and ran around like headless flies, only wanting to leave this place. The Gray Coat Army, on the other hand, carried their sharp swords and chased them all over the mountains and plains. Cheers, screams, the sound of swords piercing flesh. This was a scene of carnage. At this moment, Josiah and Borg stood up from the bushes. Josiah's expression was a little unbearable. Even though she had expected this, even though she also knew that this was war, and that it was either you die or I die, there was no luck to speak of. However, when she really faced it, Josiah realized that she was still not used to it. She really wanted to vomit now. Phew. Josiah, you have to hold on. This is the path you chose, and this is also the path you have to go through. Once the reform is successful, everything will be fine. Unlike Josiah, who was trying hard to adjust his emotions, Borg was already used to the scene in front of him. However, at this moment, his expression was still a little complicated. There was a hint of embarrassment amidst his excitement. After all, he had just said that Arthur was a coward. Who would have thought that he would be slapped in the face so quickly? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 120. The army was defeated like a landslide. At this time, even a peerless general couldn't salvage the situation. 10 minutes later, the ambush in the canyon ended. The soldiers of the transport team were completely defeated, and there were countless casualties. Other than the 100 or so people who escaped, the rest were all left here. The Gray Coat Army was very satisfied with this result. As for those who escaped, there was nothing they could do about it. They didn't plan to surround and annihilate the enemy in the first place. After all, they only had half of the enemy's number. If they still sent people out to intercept them, it would be too risky. Since the battle was won, it was naturally time to clean up the battlefield and collect the spoils of war. Darren commanded the Gray Coat Army to collect the enemy's weapons and strip the soldiers of their armor. Search. Empty. Strip them clean. Strictly implement the post-war 3 empty policy. Search carefully. Don't miss anything in their shoes or hair. These soldiers will definitely bring the money with them when they come out. The Gray Coat Army was poor, and this small army was even poorer. Other than the essential low-quality machete, they didn't have any equipment. Now that they saw these soldiers wearing standard armor, everyone's eyes turned red. They couldn't wait to strip off their undergarments. Josiah and Borg walked down the mountain excitedly. Of course, they weren't going to strip the dead soldiers of their belongings. After all, they used to be nobles. Their target was the dozen or so carriages covered in tarps. At this time, Tang In also walked out from the other side of the mountain. Some of the Gray Coat Army members saw him and couldn't help but straighten their bodies, revealing looks of admiration. Actually, after interacting with each other for the past few days, most of them knew Tang In. They usually gathered together and joked with each other. No one would have thought that this ordinary-looking and easygoing fellow would actually be so powerful. Thinking about that swift and violent attack just now, everyone felt a chill on their necks. Haha, beautiful. Brother Arthur, that attack was really beautiful. Darren walked up and patted Tang In's shoulder, praising him nonstop. In this Gray Coat Army, Darren and Borg were the strongest in terms of battle energy. They were both beginner, mid-level warriors. Darren's battle aura was basically obtained by tempering his body step by step. As for Borg, he was born in a noble family and had his own battle chi cultivation method, so his cultivation speed was naturally faster. Therefore, although there was a 20-year age difference between the two, their battle chi cultivation was the same. In the future, Borg's battle aura cultivation would definitely surpass Darren's. However, if the two of them were to risk their lives, Darren would definitely be able to kill Borg in a short period of time. This was the difference in battle experience. Therefore, only Darren, who had experienced hundreds of battles, could understand the trick behind Twain's attack. Although it seemed straightforward to suddenly attack and become a marquis with a single stab, the difficulty in doing so was not something that outsiders could understand. The infantry captain was able to command nearly 1,000 men, so he definitely had some strength. But when faced with his saber, he actually didn't react at all. This could only mean that the assassination just now, whether it was the timing or the strength of the attack, could be said to be perfect, professional. What exactly did this brother Arthur do in the past? Luck, pure luck, Tang Yin replied with a chuckle. Hey, brother Arthur, you're too humble. Haha, amazing. I've been hiding so deeply, yet you've seen through it. The two of them teased as they walked to the carriage. At this moment, Josiah and Borg had also arrived. Tang, Arthur, you're too amazing. Josiah stared straight at Tang with his sparkling eyes, his face full of admiration. She knew that Tang was an assassin, but knowing and seeing were two completely different things. In the past, when she heard about assassins, she would feel disgusted like a normal person. She would feel that these people were despicable to kill for money. But now, when she saw Tang jump up and swing his saber, she only felt a sense of amazement. Any man would feel proud to be looked at by a beautiful girl like this. Tang was also a man, so he chose to laugh into the sky. Brother Arthur, I'm impressed. This time, you've really opened Borg's eyes. I didn't really believe you previously, but now it seems that I was short-sighted. I'm really sorry. Borg's tone was sincere as he bowed with a face full of admiration. No need. Haha, I'm a little embarrassed by your compliments. Tang touched his nose and laughed. Let's look at the spoils of war first. We've been busy for a few days. Let's see what we've gained. Haha, great. Darren walked forward and began to lift the tarpaulin. There were a total of 11 carriages, 10 small and 1 large. After Darren lifted the tarpaulin of the first carriage, he couldn't help but cheer. The carriage was filled with burlap bags, which were stacked neatly. It was no wonder that Darren was cheering, because these bags were often used to store food. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and Darren inserted a small knife into the bag. When he pulled it out, big white rice grains fell out. Wow. The surrounding gray coat army members couldn't help but raise their hands and cheer. Josiah was so excited that she jumped on the spot. Food was the key to their courage to rob the military supplies this time. Now that they had obtained it, they were naturally overjoyed. Then, Darren lifted the tarpaulin of the remaining 9 smaller carriages in one go. The harvest was bountiful. There were a total of 5 carriages of food, 3 carriages of flour, 1 carriage of cured meat, and 1 carriage of salt, seasoning, and other things. Everyone was going crazy. These things were enough for them to survive this winter smoothly. Yay! Tang suddenly felt a fragrance lingering around him. Then, a warm and soft body pounced into his embrace. Tang didn't have much feelings for the Gray Coat Army, so he couldn't completely empathize with their joy after solving the food problem. However, Josiah was different. She had completely integrated into the Gray Coat Army. Due to the food problem, the entire Gray Coat Army was extremely anxious these days. Looking at the soup and rice that were getting thinner and thinner, and seeing the young children clamoring for another bowl, Josiah really felt like a knife was being twisted in her heart. This was a feeling she had never experienced before in her aristocratic life. Therefore, after solving this problem, Josiah was so excited that she went crazy. She turned around and hugged Tang dizzily. Actually, Tang and Borg were beside her. Perhaps they were acquaintances after all. In the end, Tang was the one who enjoyed this benefit. Moreover, the excited Josiah wasn't hugging quietly. She was hugging and jumping at the same time. The two of them were so close now, so they kept rubbing against each other. Tang was also a little dizzy now. I haven't eaten meat for so many days. Why is my blood pressure still so high? No one noticed that Borg's eyes were about to spit fire at this moment. Happy times were always short-lived. In just a short while, the cheering Josiah let go of her arms and ran elsewhere to jump happily. What a pity! Tangen couldn't help but smack his lips. At this moment, the excited Darren jumped down from the mountain of carriages and walked towards the last carriage. This carriage was the biggest one. It was twice the size of the other carriages. When the transport team first started moving, it was the last one. There were a few deep marks on the road that this carriage walked on, which really slowed down the team's speed. Darren rubbed his hands excitedly, untied the oilcloth, and lifted it up. F*CK. F*CKU. It was no wonder everyone had such a reaction. It turned out that there was a layer of black cloth under the oilcloth. He could only see that there was a sharp object inside. It stood up abruptly and pushed the black cloth up a bit. At this moment, Darren simply took out his sword and cut the rope of the black cloth. Swoosh! The black cloth slid down. First, that sharp object appeared in front of everyone. It turned out to be a thick black metal rod. Oh no, it was a metal pipe, because from the front, it was obvious that the metal was hollow in the middle. The oilcloth slid down the metal pipe. Whoosh! A strange-looking object appeared in front of everyone. A huge metal box was placed on the carriage. There seemed to be a handle-like thing protruding from the back of the box. The box was also filled with holes and indecipherable patterns. A metal pipe stretched out from inside and pointed diagonally at the sky. Everyone's mouths were wide open. What was this thing? If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 121. It was almost noon. Although the sun was high up in the sky, it didn't give people any warmth. The cold wind that blew through the forest was like a harmless piece of glass that was cut into many small pieces, cutting into their bare faces. It was painful to the core. At this moment, there was a group of people walking slowly along the intricate mountain path in a lofty mountain range. The cold weather didn't seem to affect their cheerful mood. Among the constant chatter, it wasn't hard to tell that the reason for their excitement was the dozen or so carriages behind them. This thing is called Thor's hammer. I've seen it before when I was fighting in the north. This thing is very precious and can't be touched. I used to be in the big sword camp. Damn it, you didn't see how arrogant the soldiers who controlled this thing were. They talked to us as if their eyes were on their heads. A bearded, middle-aged man in the group gestured excitedly. But they did have the right to be arrogant. The thing they control is very powerful. Do you know why it's so powerful? The man asked and answered his own question. There's a huge explosive crystal inside. If you hit it accurately, and the crystal flies out and explodes in the middle of a group of soldiers. TSK, TSK. Tragic, tragic, too tragic. Uncle Darren, is there a crystal inside? Hee, there's one. I've seen it. The man stroked his beard and laughed. Then he sighed. Damn it, it's a pity there's only one. If this thing doesn't have a crystal, it's like a piece of scrap metal. Uncle, don't be too greedy. It's good enough to have one crystal. That's right. That's right. The man thought for a while and laughed happily. If we can get Thor's hammer this time, we could get explosive crystals next time. It seemed like this man was addicted to robbing. This group of people was the Gray Coat Army that had just returned from a robbery. Uncle Darren, who used to be a soldier, recognized that strange-looking thing. It was called Thor's hammer. The name was domineering, and it was powerful. It was considered a heavy military weapon. When the Brand Kingdom's Northern Army sent the Grey Flame Army equipment, they missed out on Thor's hammer. This caused the Blue Flame Legion to be very displeased, so they hurriedly urged the infantry to send over some extra supplies as an apology. Unexpectedly, they all fell into the hands of the Gray Coat Army, whose eyes were red from the lack of food. The location of the ambush was still some distance away from the valley. This was also for the sake of safety. This was to prevent people from coming to their door the moment they started robbing. Tang Yin and the others walked for half a day before they finally arrived at the encampment. Needless to say, there was another round of celebration and welcome. Of course, there was also a tinge of sadness. The Greycoat Army's ambush was very successful, but it didn't mean that there were no casualties. In this battle, the Greycoat Army had suffered more than 10 casualties. Those who were injured were lucky. Regardless of whether they were missing an arm or a leg, they were still alive. However, those who had sacrificed themselves could not be redeemed. One of them had family members here. Looking at her family member who had their eyes closed forever, the woman's legs went soft, and she sat down on the ground after finishing his late lunch. Tang In walked into the cave. He was still staying here, but there was a wooden door at the entrance of the cave. What? Why didn't he stay in the wooden house outside? Come on, although the wooden house is romantic, it's still leaky. Okay. Not long after, there was a knock on the wooden door. Tang In opened the door and saw Josiah standing outside. Oh, what's the matter? The cold wind was shrill, and the black crows were cawing. In the east of the valley, there was a slightly sloped mound. At this moment, there were more than 10 pits dug here. Everyone in the Greycoat Army was gathered here, standing in a half-moon shape. In the middle of the crowd, there was a freshly built coffin. The soldiers who had sacrificed themselves were resting inside. An old woman was reciting something beside the coffin. Looking at the book in her hand, it was probably the Temple of Light's prayers for the dead. Josiah kept comforting the woman who had lost her family. After a while, the old woman finished reciting. Darren took a step forward with a solemn expression, took a deep breath, and said, "Bow." The coffin was lifted up and slowly moved forward as everyone bowed to send it off. It was placed into the pit in a solemn atmosphere. Next, it was time to cover the soil and set up the tombstone. Everyone walked forward one by one and placed the red and white flowers in their hands in front of the tombstone. After offering the flowers, Darren blinked his slightly red eyes and walked to the sad woman. He bowed deeply and said, "Madam, I'm sorry that I couldn't bring your husband back safely. Don't worry, as long as the Greycoat Army exists, all of us will take care of you." The woman covered her mouth and wiped her tears. "Captain Darren, it's not your fault. This is what he wanted to do. This is what he was willing to do. Boo-hoo." After the funeral, the sad madam was persuaded to go back, and the crowd gradually dispersed. Josiah didn't leave. She was staring at the white tombstones in a daze. "Why are you still sad?" Tang In walked over. "Yes." Josiah wiped his eyes, then looked at Tang Un and said, "They met the god of light after they died, and then entered the reclining garden, right?" The reclining garden, according to the Temple of Light, was a place where good people went to enjoy life after they died. Tang In was silent, then said, "Yes, they will enter." "Ha! Look at me." Josiah forced a smile and blinked. "You haven't died before. How would you know? I've died before. But maybe I wasn't a local then, or maybe I wasn't a good person, so I didn't enter, but I believe that the God of Light will definitely let them in. They sacrificed themselves for thousands of civilians." Josiah said firmly, "Yes." Tang In agreed. Then Josiah looked at the tombstones one by one, as if trying to remember their names. "Tang, if you die, what kind of tombstone will you engrave?" Tang In couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Can't you hope for something good for me?" I said if. "Well, if it's me, I'll engrave on my tombstone, 'This is a girl who pursues freedom and democracy.'" "Ha," Josiah said with a smile. "If it's me, I'll engrave. Actually, I can still save, Josiah opened his mouth wide, and his stunned expression was a little cute. "I'm just kidding." Tang In smiled, then pondered and said, "Well, I'll engrave. I'm a good person." Josiah, who had just recovered his expression, blinked and asked in confusion, Why? Tang In smacked his lips. "Think about it. I'm an assassin. I can't even remember the people I've killed. Only by engraving that I'm a good person on the tombstone, and then carrying this thing, can I hide from the God of Light and sneak into the reclining paradise." Josiah couldn't help but hit Tang on. "Tang, you can't say that. The God of Light can't be deceived. He'll know." "Oh, is that so?" Tang In curled his lips with a look of disapproval. "Can't be deceived? Then what about Sessman? Will the God of Light also hide under the lamp?" Okay, let's go, let's go. Okay. Josiah bowed deeply to the tombstones for the last time, and then walked toward the valley with Tang Un. Caw-caw. Suddenly, a few crow calls came from behind. The two of them turned their heads and saw a pitch-black crow land on the spotlessly white stone tablet. Ah, this is inauspicious. Josiah was about to run over to chase the crow away. Tang In pressed down on her shoulder. Then, his long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly as he looked ahead. Josiah suddenly felt a chill on his body. Flutter. The crow that was leisurely strolling seemed to have suddenly seen a predator and flapped its wings in panic. Then Tangin raised his head and looked around. Flutter, flutter. A few panicked bird calls were accompanied by the violent flapping of wings. Dozens of crows and other birds around quickly flew away, as if there was something terrifying chasing after them. For a moment, the surroundings were silent. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 122. The winter in the north was getting colder and colder by the day. The people in the valley were still digesting the fruits of their victory. Darren would walk around the Mjolnir more than 10 times every day, as if he wanted to study it in detail. However, he was probably afraid of breaking it, so he was a little timid. As for Borg, he would occasionally look for Josiah to discuss military matters with him. Tangen's life was even simpler. He just hid in the cave and trained hard. All right, let's move our focus away from the main character and zoom to the north. The north of the north was the northern wilderness. People usually called the area near the northern wilderness the front line of the Brand Kingdom. It had to be said that this description was quite apt because the frequency of fighting here was even more than the frequency of changing clothes of noble ladies. The north was vast, so the front line was naturally very long. Due to various reasons, the Brand Kingdom was mostly on the defensive when fighting against the northern wilderness tribes. The long front line was naturally very difficult to defend, so other than some natural barriers, the Brand Kingdom built many cities and passes along the front line to stop the enemy. The Grand Border City was built for this purpose. From a map, it wasn't the closest to the front line. There were a few cities in the arc in front of it. Those who understood military affairs would naturally be able to tell that these were the satellite cities of the Grand Border City. From this arrangement, one could see the importance of the Grand Border City. In reality, this was indeed the case. The front line was filled with cities of all sizes, but if you asked the leader of the Northern Wilderness tribes which city he wanted to take down the most, he would definitely tell you that it was the Grand Border City. The reason was simple. The roads behind the Grand Border City were very smooth, and there were almost no natural barriers. As long as they could take down this city, the Northern Wilderness Cavalry would be able to advance and attack the hinterland of the north. With such a good terrain, it was naturally the focus of the Northern Wilderness tribes. In reality, the Grand Border City had been taken down many times in the past few hundred years since the establishment of the Brand Kingdom. It would be taken down once every few years. No one knew how many times it had been rebuilt except by reading historical records. However, ever since the Empire's Zechen Legion had been stationed here, the walls of the Grand Border City had never been attacked in the past 20 years. Even the satellite city in front of it had never been attacked. Of course, it wasn't because the Northern Wilderness tribes didn't want to fight. At this moment, in the Grand Pass, there were very few pedestrians on the wide streets, but that didn't mean that there were no civilians in this important military city. In fact, after more than 10 years of recuperation, this place had gathered a lot of people, much better than other northern cities. The reason why it was so lonely was because of the damned weather. Tang In and the others who lived in the northern valley all felt the chill, not to mention the further north they went. No one would be willing to go out in such terrible weather if it wasn't necessary. Moving his gaze forward, he arrived at the center of the city. In other cities, this was where the majestic City Lord's mansion was located. However, in the Grand Border City, this place was a short conjoined building complex. The style was neither luxurious nor dignified. From afar, it looked like a military camp. In the east of these buildings, there was an inconspicuous house. All right, Every house here was inconspicuous. The furnishings in the house were very messy. There were many long desks scattered all over the place, and all sorts of documents and letters were piled up on the desks. There was even a map hanging on the innermost wall. The lines on the map were crisscrossing, almost covering the mountains and rivers on the map. There were burning braziers placed all around the room. This was a must for a house in the north, but there were as many as 6 braziers placed in the room. This wasn't heating anymore, it was making them sweat. There were 3 people in such a hot and stuffy room. 2 of them were sweating profusely, and their faces were red as they stood on either side of the desk. One of them was holding a piece of paper, while the other was pulling it at a constant speed. The paper was glued together like a white ribbon, passing by the person sitting in the middle. The person in the middle was dressed very strangely. He was actually wearing a purple fur cloak. That's right, this was the right time to dress like this, but there were 6 braziers here. Didn't you see that the 2 people beside him were only wearing underwear, but they were already sweating like rain? After a while, the large pile of white paper was pulled out. The person in the middle raised her head. She had limpid eyes and thin lips that were like willow leaves. Her facial features were extremely exquisite. Her lips were slightly purple, and her face was so pale that it was almost impossible to see any trace of blood flowing. It made people unable to help but feel pity for her. Oh, this was such a delicate girl. This is all the information we have today. This slightly magnetic voice. Oh, what's that bulge on his neck? Adam's apple. This person with delicate facial features and incomparably delicate body was actually a man. Yes, Marshall. Perhaps they were used to it. But the 2 people's expressions were very calm. Cough, cough, what do you think? The purple-clothed person coughed twice, stretched his body, and leaned back on the chair. If one could wake up from the entanglement of gender, they would easily notice an abnormality. Even in such an environment, there wasn't a single drop of sweat on the purple-clothed person's face. The person standing on the left spoke first. According to the recent movements of the tribes, I think the northern wilderness is preparing for war. There might be a battle this winter. The person on the right nodded slightly, obviously agreeing with this point of view. It's not a possibility, it's a certainty. The purple-clothed person smiled faintly. Hearing this, the 2 people immediately nodded, as if they didn't suspect anything at all. About a month later, cough, cough. The purple-clothed person frowned, calming his breathing. Go and inform Thunder and Blue Flame Army. Remind them that the northern wilderness might choose Blue Flame Army's base to attack. Cough, 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 cough. Before he finished speaking, the purple-clothed person suddenly couldn't help but bend over and cough nonstop. Marshall. The 2 of them took a step forward and said with a pained expression. The purple-clothed person waved his hand, took out a crystal bottle filled with purple liquid from his pocket, and took a sip. Phew! He exhaled deeply, then sat up straight again. It's all right, go quickly. Yes. Marshall, take care of yourself. The 2 people looked at the crystal bottle hesitantly, then left helplessly. After resting for a while, the purple-clothed person stood up, walked around the table, opened the door, and walked out. Tightening his cloak, the purple-clothed person didn't go far. Instead, he turned into the room next door. It was much more lively here. A large group of young people wearing Brand's military uniform kept walking around. There were also people arguing loudly everywhere. Marshall, a middle-aged military officer, saw the purple-clothed person, quickly came up and bowed. It's very lively here. How is it? How are these students? The purple-clothed person smiled and asked. The middle-aged military officer smiled and shook his head. Not good. Most of them are arrogant but incompetent. Yesterday, I saw a projection of a battle to the northern wilderness imperial city. Damn, it feels like all the wars we've been fighting all these years have been for nothing, Ha! The purple-clothed person chuckled and said, They're still young. They'll get better in the future. They're the top students of the capital city's first military academy. They're also the future of the Brand Kingdom. Young? Marshall, you're so young, but you're already famous. Sai, when I think about these people leading troops on the battlefield in the future, I feel that the future of the Brand Kingdom is bleak. The middle-aged military officer obviously didn't have high hopes. You're too pessimistic. As long as they don't die, the battlefield will teach them to grow up, the purple-clothed person said calmly. I hope so. The purple-clothed person and the middle-aged military officer took a few steps forward and walked inside. At this time, some of the young military officers had already noticed them. The middle-aged military officer was fine. They had already seen him before. However, the purple-clothed person walking in front of them surprised them. Women can come in here? Damn, it can't be. It's a man. This is embarrassing for me as the most handsome guy in the academy. Why does he look so familiar? At this time, the purple-clothed person stopped. Next to him were two young military officers arguing. They were the loudest in the entire room. They're definitely hiding here. This is the most secluded place within 50 miles. Bullsh asterisk T. Are you saying that they can detect the supply team from 50 miles away? I'm telling you, they're definitely here. Not only is the terrain hidden here, but it's also more than 10 miles away from the ambush site. Only then can they know that there's a supply team passing by. Can't they know in advance? Ridiculous. You're too close to the ambush site. Aren't they afraid of being found out? The most dangerous place is the safest place. Haven't you heard of this before? The two of them were arguing until their faces turned red. It was about to escalate from a verbal fight to a physical fight. The middle-aged military officer saw the purple-clothed person stop and explained, a few days ago, a supply team was robbed by the Gray Coat Army. As you know, the kingdom has recently decided to encircle and annihilate the Gray Coat Army. Therefore, they reported some information to us and asked us to confirm the location of this Gray Coat Army group. The purple-clothed person nodded and then looked at the information about the ambush. After a short while, the purple-clothed person stepped forward and said, "Can you tell me the reason why you chose the location?" The two of them were stunned and turned to look at him. "All right, I'll let you be the judge. My reason is..." The two of them then recounted their reasons, and the purple-clothed person kept nodding slightly as he listened. Then the two of them finished. The purple-clothed person chuckled and said, "What you said seems to make sense then. Let's take a look one by one. The reason you chose this is because it's hidden enough. Yes, you have good taste. This is indeed the best place to hide things within a radius of 50 miles. However, it's not suitable for hiding people. This is a dead place. There's only one entrance and exit. It's easy to block it. Yes, your reason is that it's more than 10 miles away for reconnaissance. Not bad. Your basic skills are solid. An ordinary army's reconnaissance distance is about this. However, the place you chose is too small. At most it can hide 300 to 400 people. A group like the Gray Coat Army has some relatives following them. They ambush 300 to 400 people, but the actual number of people will be about 500. Why don't you know that they will expect this idea of yours? So they do the opposite and choose this place to fight to live. You're too far-fetched. What if this Gray Coat Army doesn't have relatives following them? Hearing that their choices were all overturned in a short while, the two officer students couldn't take it anymore. They immediately pointed their guns at the purple-clothed person and began to make things difficult for him. That's right, the situation on the battlefield is ever-changing. If you hold on to this fixed idea, you will suffer a great loss sooner or later. You said that ours are not good. If you have the ability, choose one. The middle-aged officer glared and was about to step forward. The purple-clothed person waved his hand to stop him, but he wasn't angry. He picked up a pen and circled a certain place on the map. Yes, I choose this. This valley? Ha! Do you know anything about military affairs? I thought you had found something. Tell me the reason, and see how I can argue with you. The purple-clothed person said calmly. There's no reason. Reality can prove it. Ha! You can't say it, right? Well, since you insist on not admitting defeat, then we'll write down these 3 answers. Let the soldiers attack separately, and we'll see who's right. After saying that, the officer's student took the paper and wrote down his answer with a wave of his pen. Then, he handed it to another student and finally handed it to the purple-clothed person. The purple-clothed person then drew down and handed the paper back. You haven't signed your name yet. Why? Are you afraid of being embarrassed if you lose? The purple-clothed person raised his eyebrows and then smiled. All right. Then, he took the paper again. The two officer students stared at the purple-clothed person as if they were worried that he would randomly write a name. They didn't see the mocking expression on the middle-aged officer's face. All right. The purple-clothed person returned the paper and then walked into the inner room with the middle-aged officer. The officer student who took the paper glanced at it. Z? Why was the name strange? It was a little familiar. Z. The other student looked at the guy beside him and suddenly fell into a daze. Then, his expression changed. He asked in confusion, "What's wrong with you? Did you think of a good place again?" Z. The officer student muttered. Z. This place is on the map. The name is Z. A Z? Marshal Z? Army God Z? The students beside him suddenly became excited and couldn't help but exclaim. Who is Z? He was the marshal of the Zechen Legion, the army god of Brand Kingdom. He was born in a family of generals and showed outstanding military talent since he was young. He entered the capital city's first military academy at the age of 17 and left at the age of 18 to come to the north. From then on, he started a legendary military career. First, he led 100 infantrymen to attack the tribe's food supply route and saved a city with a big fire. He went to various places in the northern front line and experienced hundreds of big and small battles without losing a single battle. When the tribes heard about Z, they were terrified and fled at the sight of his flag. After that, he took over the Zechen Legion at the age of 22 and became the youngest marshal in the history of Brand Kingdom. Oh, the Legion was still called Xingchen at that time. However, ever since Ziyi's arrival, Xingchen's name had gradually disappeared from people's minds. In the end, Bran X announced that the Xingchen Legion was officially changed to the Zechen Legion and ordered it to be stationed in the Grand Border City. After that, the Grand Border City was safe and sound for more than 10 years. Marshal Z was also given the title of Army God by the people. The surrounding students looked at the two students with pity in their eyes. The legendary war god was actually being questioned by them. Do you know anything about military affairs? They even said that the situation on the battlefield was ever-changing and that if he had a fixed mindset, he would be at a disadvantage sooner or later. Were they trying to teach the army god how to fight? They had guts. They were two King guts. This courage, this boldness, this domineering aura, they were all over the place. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 123. In a valley on a cold night. A few bonfires lit up the empty space in the wooden huts. Groups of people began to gather here. Gradually, laughter, children playing, and the sound of firewood exploding could be heard. It was a joyous atmosphere. This atmosphere was like a bonfire party. Naturally, it was to celebrate the success of the ambush a few days ago. The food problem was solved. Actually, this party was supposed to be held on the same day. However, some of their comrades had sacrificed themselves. Everyone was not in the mood, so it was postponed until today. The crowd continued to gather. Darren and Borg arrived one after another. After a while, Josiah dragged Tang in over. The bonfire party officially began. Originally, Tang did not intend to come. He had already gained some insights from researching the invisibility skill and was just about to continue working hard. However, he was dragged over by Josiah. The reason was very self-righteous. He said that Tang had been hiding in the cave all day. If he did not come out for some fresh air, he would degenerate. The conditions in the Gray Coat Army were tough. Of course, this bonfire party would not be complicated. It was just slaughtering a few animals and barbecuing them. The crowd would dance around the bonfire. Around them, some elderly people were using bamboo pipes to play the songs of the vast north. From time to time, some children would steal the pipes to play. Although it was simple, it was also a simple and joyous occasion. At this time, there was no distinction between superiors and inferiors. Darren was topless and holding a big bowl to drink with others. The color of the wine was light. It seemed to be brewed from some kind of fruit. It had a sour and spicy taste. Tang In sat in the corner and took a sip. He was a little distracted by the joyous scene. Invisibility. How did he do it? The gray coat army members looked at Tang In with a complicated expression. They wanted to toast him, but they did not dare to step forward. Tang In's position in the gray coat army was a little strange. Although he had not officially joined them, everyone recognized him. After a few days of interaction, they were familiar with each other. However, his performance when he killed the infantry captain was too shocking. It was a little scary. For the next few days, he hid in the cave and didn't come out. He gave off a strange feeling, and people couldn't help but think of the demonic beast when he first came. Tang, I didn't bring you here to hide and think about life. A cheerful voice sounded. Tang turned around and said helplessly, Who's hiding? Aren't you watching? Here, look for yourself. Josiah pointed around. Tang looked around and couldn't help but hold his forehead. Just now, he had been thinking about the skill in his mind. Just like that, he found a place in a daze. It was actually outside the crowd, in the shadow of the bonfire. It had to be said that from this place, the killer's habit had been deeply reflected on Tang In's body. This was the most inconspicuous place in the whole scene where he could get an overview of the overall situation. He quickly changed the topic. I like the quietness. TSK, you're very beautiful tonight. Haha, is that so? Thank you. Josiah happily twirled in a circle. Although it was a cloth skirt and a hairpin, it did not affect her charm in the slightest. You're welcome. It's what I should do. Tang In could guarantee with his killer's intuition that when she was twirling just now, at least 100 pairs of eyes secretly glanced at her. Ha! Tang, let's dance. Josiah held out his hand. Tang and touched his nose. I really don't know how to dance. Hi, Josiah. Another voice sounded. Borg walked over from the crowd with a smile. You're very beautiful tonight. Well, good evening, Brother Arthur. Black lapel, straight waistcoat. It was not exaggerated, but it was very neat. It could be seen that the owner had put a lot of thought into it. Thank you. Josiah smiled. The second compliment was naturally not as effective as the first one. Good evening. Tang In smiled and nodded back. Why are you here? Come in quickly. It's lively inside. Borg was very enthusiastic, and then said, Josiah, can I invite you to dance? Josiah blinked. You know how to dance? Of course. Borg raised his chin slightly. After all, he used to be a noble and had received professional training. Oh, I see. Then can I dance with you later? Sorry, Arthur doesn't know how to dance. I have to teach him first. Okay. Borg smiled. Thank you. Arthur, let's go. Hey. Tang In smiled helplessly at Borg, and then he was dragged into the arena by Josiah. Borg loosened his collar, and his smile faded. His face was a little gloomy. He used to be a noble and knew the meaning of the first dance at a party. Mr. Borg suddenly turned around, nodded, took the big bowl from the other party, and drank it in one gulp. How much do you want? Cough, 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 chili oil. The peasant woman holding a pheasant looked at Borg in a daze. Strange, why do you drink the bowl full of chili oil seasoning that I made for the pheasant? In the arena, Josiah was directing Tang In. Put your left hand here, a little lower. Yes, give me your right hand. Tang In put his hand on Xiao Shiyu's slender waist, and he couldn't help but have the urge to touch her nose. She wore a lot of winter clothes, but he could still feel her graceful curves, plus the fragrance that tickled him from time to time. Let's start with the simplest movement. Come, take the left step, withdraw. Looking at Josiah's serious expression, Tang In suddenly felt a little ashamed. Cough, cough. Appearance is emptiness. Emptiness is appearance. Gradually, the dance steps sped up, and the two began to become fluent and tacit. Hey, Tang, you really haven't learned before? Josiah said in surprise. Tang In shook his head. I really haven't. This is incredible. Really? Probably because you taught me well. Haha, I'm a killer. You want to stump me with this little balancing trick? You're too naive. Sorry. Tang In quickly let go of his foot that was stepping on Josiah's shoes. F***, Extreme joy begets sorrow. It's okay. Well, next, let's do something more complicated. After a while, the people dancing in a circle gradually stopped. They all moved their gazes to the center of the venue, where a man and a woman were dancing in various styles. The woman was bright and beautiful, and the man, had a good temperament. From the beginning, they were shaky and gradually became more comfortable. They were dancing in all kinds of gentle and elegant dance moves, and it was too much for the eyes to take in. Dancing was a skill that could make people immerse themselves in it. As the two gradually cooperated with each other, an indescribable atmosphere seemed to be slowly created when their eyes met. As the last movement stopped, Tang In leaned over and held Josiah's slender waist. Looking at the jade-like face in front of him and the beautiful red lips, Tang In suddenly felt a little itchy in his throat, and his lips were a little dry. Unknowingly, Tang In gradually leaned down. Josiah's pink lips moved slightly, as if she was afraid of rejecting him, but also as if she was infatuated with this feeling and could not bear to stop. Close. Josiah suddenly closed her eyes as if she had accepted her fate, and a bright red color appeared on her face. This action gave Tang In great courage. He held his breath and went down. Suddenly, the sky shook. Enemy attack. If you like this work, you're welcome to come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 124. Enemy attack, enemy attack, enemy attack. The deafening roar echoed in the valley, like a basin of cold water being poured over the warm bonfire. Another scream came from above. Everyone subconsciously raised their heads and looked at the top of the mountain wall. Although it was a bonfire party, the Gray Coat Army didn't forget to set up sentries outside. Other than the one at the top of the mountain, there were many scattered around. Now that the alarm came from above, there was no doubt that the other sentries in the surroundings had all been removed. In other words, the enemy was close at hand. Hide! Darren's expression changed drastically as he roared. Less than a few seconds after he finished speaking, swoosh, 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 a strange whistling sound came from above. The Gray Coat Army members who were fleeing in all directions felt their scalps go numb. Of course, they knew what this sound was. A few days ago, this sound came from them. Tang In, who felt like he had just fallen from heaven to hell, didn't say anything else. He quickly opened the door, carried Josiah's slender waist, and leaped out, crouching under the wooden house. Thud, 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 wood chips flew everywhere, and the house shook. Countless arrows shot down from the pitch-black night sky. Only the sound of raindrops hitting banana leaves could be heard. Then, there were some muffled groans and screams from time to time. The people at the gathering weren't all agile and strong young men. There were also some women, children, and the elderly. Either because their legs weren't agile enough or because they couldn't react in time, they became the victims of the first round of arrows. The people hiding in the temporary safe zone were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The current situation was only possible because the comrade at the top of the mountain shouted desperately. Otherwise, under the unguarded rain of arrows, the casualties would be unimaginable. Father! Amidst the wails, a young man rushed out and ran to the empty space outside the wooden house. Led by him, 2 or 3 people immediately rushed in while shouting the names of their loved ones. Damn it, come back! Darren was anxious. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The furthest one ran was only 3 to 5 meters away. The cold arrows spun and entered their bodies, leaving behind a large hole. In an instant, 3 fresh lives fell to the ground. They twitched a few times before falling silent. Phew! Tang In exhaled deeply and shook his head. Josiah looked at this scene in a daze, as if he had yet to recover from his shock. Helen! A woman under the wooden house opposite Tang In stood up slightly and called out to her left and right in a sobbing tone. Mommy! The barbecue grill beside the bonfire moved slightly, and a thin and small figure peeked out. Everyone turned to look and couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. It turned out that the little girl had unknowingly snuck behind the wooden barbecue grill. The wooden barbecue grill was very small and couldn't hide anything, but the skinny little girl just happened to fit inside. "Helen, stay there and don't move." The woman cried tears of joy and hurriedly said, "Mommy, I'm scared." With a slightly crying voice, the little girl struggled to get out. Helen, passive, "Don't move, Helen." The people around were shocked and shouted anxiously, "Mom." However, the little girl actually stepped forward and took 2 steps forward. A few scattered arrows continuously passed by her side. "Helen." The woman's face suddenly turned deathly pale. She screamed and got up to rush out. "Don't. Madam, you can't go." The people around were shocked and quickly rushed to the woman's side. "Mommy." Helen trembled slightly and took a few steps forward again. Whoosh, 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 no. While their hearts were trembling, the sound of arrows being shot rang out again. Everyone couldn't help but lower their heads and close their eyes. They couldn't bear to watch. Thud, thud, thud. "Mommy." Everyone looked up and saw that little Helen seemed to be scared stiff and stood still. Dozens of arrows were stuck around her, but she was miraculously unscathed. Phew! Everyone was overjoyed and let out a long sigh of relief. However, they immediately became anxious again. The child was still in the field and hadn't escaped the danger zone. No one knew if the next arrow would pass through her. "Helen, let go of me." The woman, who had almost fainted from fright, began to struggle desperately again. Tang and lowered his head and subconsciously tightened his arms. Josiah kept twisting and turning, trying to get away from him. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to save her," Josiah said resolutely. "Nonsense." Tang pressed on her shoulder. "You can't run more than a few steps, and you want to save her?" Tang was very clear about the situation in front of him. The little girl didn't get hit by the arrows because of her incredible luck, but her small and thin body also played a big role. If Josiah rushed out, he would definitely be nailed to death on the spot like the 3 young men just now. "It's none of your business. I have a way. Let go of me." With a stubborn tone, Josiah moved his tightly locked arms and struggled desperately. "You have a damn way." Tang cursed angrily. "If you can hold up a magic shield, I'll let you out right now." "Let go of me, don't move." "Ugh." Tang groaned and looked down to see Josiah biting his forearm. She looked fierce like a puppy. Then she let go and said in a cold tone, "Tang, if you don't let go of me today, I will hate you forever, forever, forever." "Ha!" After a moment of stalemate, Tang chuckled and let go of his arm. "You won't have the chance." Whoosh! Josiah only felt that his body was light, and Tang jumped out like a sharp arrow. "Hey, go back. It's dangerous." When the people around saw Tang suddenly appear in the field, they couldn't help but cry out. Tang couldn't let Josiah rush out. In this situation, she would definitely die if she came out. As a friend, he naturally couldn't let her die. Besides, he had to pay for taking advantage of others, and he had to pay for owing others a life. If he didn't come out, who would? "Damn it, you're a natural death squad." Twain cursed under his breath and flashed his dagger. Whoosh, 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 ding, ding, ding. Dots of red light scattered everywhere, and the red lines crisscrossed. The 2 burst out in an instant and covered Tang's figure. The incoming arrows were all shrouded and crushed into pieces. "Good." Everyone suddenly shouted in unison and let out a long breath. There was hope. Tang smiled bitterly. He knew his own situation. If it was daytime, Tang could see the direction of the arrows clearly, and he was confident that he could save her. But now, he was in the dark and didn't know where the defense point was. In other words, the arrows could come from any angle. He wasn't strong enough to be able to identify the location of the arrows by the sound and dodge them easily in such a rapid rain of arrows. "Fight!" Explode, explode, explode. Tang's figure suddenly disappeared from everyone's sight, and then there was a faint sound of wind and thunder. Suddenly, traces of red ripples like wind blades appeared, and they seemed to be gradually rotating around a point. At this time, a few scattered arrows crashed over and were immediately brought to the side. In a few breaths, the arcs of red ripples increased in number, and they rotated faster and faster, as if a red whirlwind had appeared on the ground. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The sound of wind being cut rang out continuously, and a red whirlwind as tall as a person had formed and was constantly expanding its range. Under everyone's widened eyes, the red whirlwind began to move forward. Bang, bang, bang. The arrows crashed over, but before they could get close to the whirlwind, they were smashed into pieces by the ripples. It was like a greedy child, and the whirlwind not only smashed the oncoming arrows, but also swept in and ate the arrows that passed by. Storm, beginner. Unbridled whirlwind and thunder, violent and cleansing the universe. Cooldown time, 1 hour. Consumes 1,000 blood chi. The red whirlwind carried a crushing force and violently moved forward more than 20 meters in an instant, all the way to Little Helen. Then, a figure swiftly floated out from the top of the whirlwind. Needless to say, this person was naturally Tang Yin, but he was not in a good state right now. The corners of his mouth, ears, nostrils, eyes, as long as there were holes on his face, blood was seeping out. Tang Yin grabbed Helen's shoulder and then, without hesitation, escaped into the whirlwind again. Then, the whirlwind that had paused for a while started to rotate again and began to move back the way it had come. It had to be said that this red whirlwind was rather conspicuous under the light of the fire, and now more than half of the arrows were flying towards it. Bang, bang, bang. The explosive power shattered all the arrows that dared to attack it, and it steadily moved forward. At this time, the people at the side saw that something was wrong. Although the red whirlwind was still powerful, its speed had greatly decreased compared to before. It was now like an old man walking, and it seemed to be very strenuous. Charge! Do your best! Hold on, it's right in front. Amidst the boiling cheers, the people clenched their fists and kept pounding the ground. Their eyes were fixed on the whirlwind, and they were itching to give it a push. At this time, the whirlwind was like a drunkard. The leak-shaped wind column was tilted badly, and it blew forward unsteadily. In this way, it moved forward more than 10 meters with great difficulty, and was only 4 or 5 meters away from Josiah's position. Whoosh, 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 bang, bang, ding. The whirlwind that was constantly crushing the arrows suddenly stopped, and then, like a house that had its roof removed, red ripples spread out in all directions. The whirlwind collapsed, and Tang Yin, who was holding the little girl, was thrown backward. No! Damn it! God of light! Everyone clutched their heads and cried out in despair. Whoosh! Suddenly, water entanglement. A delicate shout was heard. A transparent ribbon of water wrapped around Tang Yin's waist without delay, and then instantly pulled him out from under the arrows. Bang! The force was too strong, and the two people couldn't help but collide. Good. Praise the God. Ha, we did it. Although they were still in a dangerous situation, the people were elated as if they had won a battle, and they kept cheering. Huff! Huff! Tang Yin turned around and let go of little Helen. He panted heavily, and his whole body was filled with the joy of escaping death. Then, a beautiful face with slightly red eyes appeared above him. Huff! Ha, what are you doing? Huff! You still want to bite me? Tang Yin chuckled and teased Josiah. The latter didn't say anything. She pursed her lips, leaned over, and pressed her lips on Tang Yin's. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 125. The world was always dark and humorous. When you dreamed of getting something, it would always pass you by. And when you were disheartened and wanted to give up, you could easily meet it when you turned the corner. There was such a good, ambiguous atmosphere before. Tang Yin couldn't touch her even if he wanted to. Now that he was surrounded by murderous intent, he had a taste of this warm and soft jade. Life was full of ups and downs. It was too exciting. Tang Yin sighed and thought to himself, this is probably the benefit of saving someone. Helen, who was next to him, covered her eyes. Shame, shame. Tom kisses me when there's no one around. It wasn't that Josiah left, but that Tang Yin turned his head. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Damn, the atmosphere is too bad, Tang. Josiah was shocked and quickly took out a white towel to wipe Tangen's mouth. Cough, cough. I'm fine, I'm fine. It's not serious. I'm just a little dizzy. I turned too hard just now. Cough, cough. Although he kept saying that he was fine, Tangen's appearance of constantly vomiting blood was not very convincing. Josiah pursed his lips and his eyes were red. Are you really fine? Tangen spread his hands. Really? Why don't you kiss me now? I promise I won't vomit blood anymore. As they joked around, the arrows that fell gradually decreased. It would be a lie to say that Tangen's injuries were fine. If he vomited blood, it was usually an internal injury. Fortunately, he didn't lose his ability to fight. Continuing to kiss was naturally a joke. Tangen let out a long breath and stood up from the ground. At this time, only a few scattered arrows fell. The Gray Coat Army had chosen the terrain of the valley quite carefully. Although they were now on a high ground, there were too many towering trees and other obstacles below. After about 5 minutes of continuous shooting, only the first 1 or 2 waves of arrows were effective. The later waves caused little damage and were not worth mentioning. The commander above probably saw the situation clearly, so after a while, the whistling of the arrows completely stopped. Retrieve the weapon. The Luan roared. His figure suddenly shot out and crashed into a wooden house. The end of the air raid did not mean the end of the attack. In fact, the real test had only just begun. As expected, the Gray Coat Army hurriedly picked up their weapons. Deafening battle cries reverberated throughout the valley, as if there were enemies coming from all directions. After returning little Helen to the woman who kept thanking him, Josiah and Tangen found Darren, who was fully dressed. Uncle Darren, what should we do now? Darren nodded at Tangen in admiration. Then he said to Josiah, we can only break through now. Which direction? The valley was traversed by a mountain path, and there were 2 smaller paths on both sides of it. Therefore, there were a total of 4 entrances. Break out from the north. Borg rushed over hurriedly. He had gone to the stream at the side to rinse his mouth and was lucky enough to avoid the rain of arrows. The terrain in the north is the most complicated. As long as we charge out, we can shake off the pursuit in a short time. All right. Borg had always been in charge of tactical matters, so Darren had no doubts. He grabbed his 2-handed sword and rushed out of the house, grabbing a person casually. Inform everyone to break out from the north. Yes, the wooden houses with a few hundred people were not big, but they were not small either. In just an instant, the sound of battle came from the east. Then, there were battle cries from the west, south, and north. After a few hundred people had gathered, Darren took the lead and headed north. Charge! After running for a few dozen steps, there were sounds of footsteps ahead. Then, a large group of soldiers wearing green plate armor and holding large swords turned around. Kill! When they met on a narrow path, it was a close-range battle. Without saying anything, both sides were quickly entangled with murderous intent. The sound of swords clashing, the sound of soldiers piercing into flesh, the sound of muffled screams. The battle had reached its climax right from the start. Darren roared and rushed to the front of the group. The red sword in his hand whistled like a gust of wind. He slashed in all directions, blocking and flying. He was domineering and mighty like a tiger in a flock of sheep. The Gray Coat Army behind him formed a triangular formation and continued to advance. At this moment, it didn't matter what moves they used. The enemy was within sight. It was a competition of whose attack was faster and whose attack was more accurate. As long as you stabbed your weapon into the enemy's vitals, you could live a little longer than him. Such an environment wasn't suitable for an assassin. Tangen tried to attack head-on a few times before decisively retreating to the second line. It wasn't because these soldiers were more powerful than him. In fact, if they were alone or given a slightly more complicated environment, Tangen could easily kill them. However, in this crowded group battle, his attacks seemed very awkward. Especially his movement techniques, he couldn't use them at all. These people weren't the aristocratic guards he met in Lion City. They were veterans with rich battle experience. Their attacks were ruthless, and they cooperated well. At the crucial moment, they would even grab the weapon that was stabbed into their chest and give their comrades a chance to kill them. Tangan had just scattered the red glow of his dagger and didn't wait for it to hit. Over 10 giant swords fell from the other side and sealed off the attacking space. Even if his skills were better and he managed to injure his opponent, before he could take advantage of the opportunity to pursue an attack, someone would stab him in the chest. If it was under normal circumstances, Tang In would naturally be able to dodge easily and take advantage of the opportunity to kill his opponent. But now, he had the Gray Coat Army beside him. If he dodged, he would leave his opponent with a defenseless back. At this moment, there was actually a solution. Like his opponent, he had a comrade who could help him block the attack so that he could focus on killing the enemy. But Tang En had never fought together with a Gray Coat Army like this before. In addition, his attack rhythm was too fast. Ordinary people really couldn't coordinate with him. Tang En quickly realized where the problem was. After blocking an attack, he turned around and said to a young man behind him, "Change positions." After saying that, he didn't care whether the person understood or not. He grabbed the person's shoulder and instantly changed positions. The young man was puzzled and looked at the enemy who suddenly appeared in front of him. "Raise your sword." The young man subconsciously raised his sword. Clang! It blocked a soldier's attack. At this moment, a figure suddenly flashed out from behind the young man. The dagger lightly swept across the soldier's neck where the armor couldn't reach. Then it instantly returned. No one was able to see clearly these few movements. Hiss! Blood spurted out and splattered on the young man's face. "What's going on, Chop?" The young man shuddered again and hurriedly swung his sword. Clang! This time, it was blocked by his opponent. The figure flashed out again like a ghost. He swung his sword and returned. Hiss! Blood bloomed again. This was Tang En's tactic. Since no one could follow his rhythm and coordinate with him, he might as well coordinate with others to attack. In this way, he didn't have to take the attack head-on and could use his own advantage. After a few rounds of coordination, the young man was enlightened. He immediately waved his sword excitedly and slashed around. As long as he was able to parry or attack, the soldier would die without a doubt. After a few rounds of attacks, no one was a match for him. Whoever he caught would die. After the other soldiers suffered a few losses, they felt disgusted when they saw the young man rushing up again. They had no problem killing this hothead. No matter how bad they were, they could still block him. However, Tang In, who was like a death god, was terrifying. One had to know that he had attacked more than 10 times and had never missed. In a dilemma, the soldiers had no choice but to dodge. The young man saw that everywhere he went, the enemy retreated. He couldn't help but look around with his sword and laugh arrogantly. It had to be said that this young man was good at drawing hatred. His face was asking for a beating, making the other party gnash their teeth. The last soldier couldn't take it anymore and immediately rushed over and slashed with his sword. Clang! Hiss! Tang En's dagger added another soul to the dead. This idiot, wah! While laughing, the young man kicked away the soldier's corpse and was about to rush up again. Damn it! Tang En pulled him back with a dark expression. What kind of joke was this? 2 people wanted to go deep into the enemy's group? Even if they wanted to die, they shouldn't be in such a hurry. After the young man was pulled back, he instantly realized the problem and broke out in cold sweat. If he really rushed in like this, Tang En should be able to come back. He would most likely be in for a tragedy. After laughing foolishly, he scratched his head and said, "Thank you, big brother Arthur. You're welcome. Let's go and continue at another place." Okay, if you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 126. There was a pungent, burnt smell, deafening battle cries, burning wooden houses everywhere. The originally quiet and peaceful valley was no longer the same. If one were to look down from above, they would be able to clearly see soldiers in standard armor pouring into the wooden houses from all directions. In the north, The Gray Coat Army was fighting a bloody battle and trying their best to break out of the encirclement. The current situation was very clear. Either the soldiers would form an encirclement net and wipe out the Gray Coat Army in one fell swoop, or the Gray Coat Army would be sharp and tear open a gap to break out of the encirclement. Ting In and the young man formed a deceiving team that cooperated even better. After their previous experience, they strictly followed the policy of changing places after every shot and constantly moved around the triangular formation. Their unity was like an impregnable fortress. With this deceiving team stirring up trouble everywhere, the swordsman brigade that had rushed over quickly couldn't withstand the Gray Coat Army's breakout pace. They kept retreating and were about to be completely defeated. Roar! With a furious roar, Darren violently slashed out with his sword. Clang! The leader of the swordsman brigade was sent flying into a wooden house with his sword. Darren was overjoyed. "Haha, we made out!" Darren exclaimed. "Haha, we made it!" Everyone was energized when they heard this. They increased the strength of the weapons in their hands. The remaining soldiers couldn't withstand it anymore. Their formation instantly collapsed and was finally defeated. Charge, charge, charge! Darren waved his hand and led the Gray Coat Army forward quickly. The most important thing now was to break out of the encirclement. It was useless to kill these demoralized soldiers. Suddenly, thud, 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 a series of heavy footsteps came from the front, and the wooden house trembled slightly. Darren was stunned at first. Then his expression changed drastically. At this moment, everyone didn't stop and rushed out of the last corner. Gasp! Everyone gasped in unison. With the help of the light from the fires around them, they could see a group of special forces slowly walking out of the mountain pass 100 meters away. They were armed to the teeth with shields in their left hands and battle axes in their right hands. Brand heavy infantry. The corner of Darren's eyes twitched as he squeezed these words out from between his teeth. Heavy infantry. Just from a name alone, one could tell that this was a troop class with insane defense. This was the truth. Just like the heavy cavalry, they had the strongest defense in the Brand Kingdom. Their main role was to defend in field battles. If a full formation of heavy infantry appeared, the enemy's archers, light cavalry, and light infantry would generally take a detour. There weren't many heavy infantrymen in front of him, only about 50 of them. After taking a few steps forward, they stuck their tower shields into the ground and stood still in a defensive formation. "It's over." Bord's voice was filled with despair. He was a tactical commander, so he naturally understood what the heavy infantry in front of him would do to them. It was impossible for them to break through this defense with just a few of them. In fact, if the enemy pushed forward, they would be pushed back instead. "How can there be heavy infantry here?" Bord groaned and grabbed his hair. Heavy infantry had high defense, but due to their weight, they were also the slowest of all the troops. Moreover, the mountain path here was rugged and not suitable for traveling at all, unless they were transported by car. But in that case, there wouldn't be a lot of them. There would probably only be 50 of them in front of him. Borg suddenly raised his head and cried out, "They know that we will choose to break through from the north." Borg didn't know that after Z circled their hiding spot on the map, the tactical department of the Zichan Legion casually gave a battle suggestion to place 50 heavy infantrymen at the mountain pass in the north. When the military officials saw Z's signature and Zichan's tactical department suggestion, they were instantly shocked. They didn't understand why Marshal Z would pay attention to this small Gray Coat Army. However, even though they couldn't figure it out, they still strictly carried out this suggestion. It was as if Borg had exchanged blows with Zichan's tactical department, and the result was naturally that he was killed instantly. At this time, there was a faint noise behind them. Without a doubt, it was the soldiers from the other 3 routes that were about to arrive. There was an iron wall in front of them, and a fierce tiger chasing after them from behind. The Gray Coat Army had been forced into a dead end. Darren took a deep breath and tightened his grip on his greatsword. He turned to look at his blood-stained companions and the women, children, and elderly who were protected in the middle. "Brothers, we have no other way out. I hope that you will follow me and charge forward one last time. He raised his great sword and pointed to the front. No matter what method we use, no matter how many people die, even if we have to bite them with our teeth, we have to bite out a path and send our families away. Brothers, do you dare? Yes, yes, yes. It was like the first clap of thunder in the gloomy weather. Everyone in the gray-coat army raised their heads and stared at the heavy infantrymen in front of them like starving wolves. All right, Darren roared. Then follow me now, wait. Darren looked at Tang, and who walked out of the crowd in surprise. Brother Arthur, do you have something else to say? Yes. Tang, and shrugged. I don't understand. Don't we have that Mjolnir? Why don't we blow them up? Damn it. Darren knocked his head hard and exclaimed in surprise, Yes, Mjolnir. Why didn't I think of that? Ha! Borg's eyes lit up as well. He hit his palm. That's right. We can definitely blow them up with Mjolnir. Then where's Mjolnir? Tang asked helplessly when he saw that the two of them were filled with regret and joy. Instantly, everyone turned to look at Darren. Darren treasured this thing the most. He kept it 2 days ago and said that he wanted to keep it well. I put it in the warehouse. Darren turned to the right. Well, thank the heavens. Fortunately, the warehouse was built not far from them. If it was in another direction, it would be a problem for them to kill their way back. By then, they would really cry to death. Without needing Darren to say anything, everyone rushed to the front of the warehouse. Although it was called a warehouse, it was actually just a slightly bigger wooden house. The person at the front didn't say anything. He swung his sword and broke the chain on the door. They pushed the door open and entered. The food, flour, bacon, and Mjolnir that they had robbed were all there quietly. Quick, push it out. Everyone moved Mjolnir out of the warehouse and aimed it at the mountain path. Damn it, what a pity. Darren looked at the other resources and said fiercely, Pour tung oil on it and burn it before we leave. Yes. After that, Darren walked out of the warehouse quickly. Suddenly, he realized that everyone was looking at him. Oh, what's wrong? Nonsense. Hurry up and activate Mjolnir. Darren opened his mouth and pointed at himself blankly. Me? I don't know how to use it. What? Everyone was shocked. Josiah blinked. Uncle Darren, stop fooling around. Why do you sound so logical when you don't know how to use it? I really don't know how to use it. Darren hammered his palms anxiously. I heard it from someone else. F***CK. Everyone was instantly petrified. Nobody expected such a blunder to happen in the end. It wasn't easy for them to grab hold of a life-saving straw, but it still couldn't be used. The noise behind them grew louder and louder. The pursuers were closing in. Damn it, Tang licked his lips and said decisively, Uncle Darren, you're the one who knows best here. Hurry up and try it. Darren took 2 steps forward and quickly turned the handle at the back. Gradually, the back of the metal box opened. Here, I only know how to do this. Tang, Josiah, and Borg all looked over at the same time. The metal box looked very complicated. At the top, near the metal tube, there was a fiery red crystal the size of a head. Needless to say, this should be the explosive crystal. Below the crystal, there were many dazzling will devices. Further down, there were many small wrenches of unknown use. Around these things, there were all kinds of messy symbols. F***CK. Why didn't they give a product manual or something? Darren pointed at the row of wrenches below and said, If I remember correctly, one of these should be the activation device. Then what are we waiting for? Let's try them one by one. With that, Borg reached out his hand. Don't move, Darren shouted anxiously. Mjolnir is a military weapon unique to the Brand Kingdom. In order to prevent it from being snatched by the Northern Wilderness tribes, there's a self-destruct device inside. If you accidentally press it, the explosive crystal will explode immediately. F***CK. Everyone was a little dumbfounded. They couldn't F***king touch it. Miss Josiah, aren't you a mage? Can you understand these symbols? Darren asked as he pointed at the symbols beside the wrenches. Josiah smiled helplessly. Uncle Darren, these are alchemy symbols, not magic spells. I don't understand them either. Sigh. Tang In suddenly had a thought. He took 2 steps back and secretly called out to the killer system. Old butler, here. The old butler was standing with his hands behind his back as he stared at the screen. On the screen was the scene of Tang In casting storm. Old butler, do you know how to use Mjolnir? No. The old butler answered very straightforwardly. Then what should we do now? Ask yourself. Tang In scratched his head. Please, old butler, can you not be so mysterious? I don't understand. The old butler didn't even turn his head as he calmly said, do you still remember those animals when you first learned how to use a crossbow? Any living creature has an instinctive sense of danger. The only difference is the strength of it. You're an assassin. Ask your instincts. Are you King calling me a minesweeper? Tang In suddenly raised his eyebrows. So, old butler, you definitely know which ones can be touched and which ones can't. Yes, but I'm not telling you. The old butler waved his hand. CK. Tang In was instantly chased back to reality. CK. I can't drag this out any longer. Step back, I'll do it. Darren threw away his sword and was about to step forward. No, I'll do it. Captain Darren, my life is worthless. Let me do it. I'm old, and I've lived enough. Let me do it. Shut up. Because of his performance these few times, Tang In still had some prestige in this team. Hence, the crowd instantly fell silent. Uncle Darren, are you sure you can hit the mountain pass from this height? Sure. What are you going to do? Tang In smiled. I know what to do. Step back. Everyone looked at Tang in shock. Brother Arthur, don't lie to me. I was the one who told you the name of Mjolnir. How do you know how to do it? Darren questioned. I'll use another method. Tang In's tone was calm, and his eyes gradually became indifferent. He suddenly took a step forward and looked up. Whoa! A murderous aura filled the air. Darren only felt a chill on his body and couldn't help but take a step back. The chill disappeared, and Tang In's eyes returned to normal. I can feel the danger. Don't worry, leave it to me. Darren hesitated. Tang, Arthur, I believe in you. Josiah bit his lips and looked at Tang In. Then he waved his hand and said, everyone step back, step back. After a while, everyone retreated into the warehouse. Believe in me? I don't even believe in myself. Tang In smiled bitterly and looked down at the dozen small wrenches. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Phew. Tang In looked up. Damn, this is superstition and idealism. As the crowd dispersed, the heavy infantryman opposite seemed to have seen the situation here. Instantly, there was a commotion. Some retreated, and some slowly walked over. It was obvious that they wanted to speed up, but their armor was indeed cumbersome. Looking at those guys who had caused them to be unable to advance or retreat, Tang In let out a long laugh. Then, without even looking, he lifted his leg and kicked the wrench below. I still believe that things like electrical appliances and machinery need to be kicked. Bang! Tang In did not know how many wrenches he had kicked off with this kick. He held his breath. There was silence. At this moment, he even felt that he could hear the blood flowing in his body. The next second, buzz, the wheels in the metal box suddenly spun rapidly, and then the exposed explosive crystals sank, rustle, boom, to be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 127. If your computer mainframe doesn't respond, if your TV screen shows static, if your car suddenly can't start, don't hesitate, kick it. Believe me, things like machinery and electrical appliances will be fine after you kick them. If you break them, you can come to the other world to ask me for compensation. Tang In, well, sometimes also called Arthur. When you're outside, you know. Alright, before doing the above actions, you'd better have a keen intuition for danger. Because if you're not careful, you may kick wires, electric panels, and the like. The last time Tang In kicked an electrical appliance, he died and transmigrated. This time, he kicked it again decisively. Regardless of the result, this spirit of bravery in sacrificing oneself for theoretical practice was still worth encouraging. Compared to his previous identity as an ordinary person, the current Tang, and was already an assassin with blood on his hands. The old butler's words about the assassin's intuition were right beside his ear. It sounded reasonable, but in reality, it felt very unreliable. Staring at the wrench for more than 10 seconds, Tang In actually had some feelings in his heart. But who could guarantee that this feeling was not an illusion? Just like when he bought the lottery ticket in the past, he also had a feeling in his heart. But in the end, it turned out to be just an illusion. Screw it. Kick it. Seeing the explosive crystal sink, as if it had entered a metal pipe, Tang An's heart was filled with hope. The heavy metal box trembled incessantly, and with a flash of fire at the front, a fireball-like object popped out and instantly fell forward. The heavy soldiers, they were already scared out of their wits when they saw Mjolnir, but now they were completely stunned when they saw the fireball coming straight at them. Boom! The ground shook and gravel scattered. Under the powerful explosive force, those heavy armored soldiers with the body of a small tank were like paper kites, lightly shaken into the air. Then, the soldiers were shaken into the air. Bang, bang, bang. Dozens of severely deformed black iron pieces fell everywhere, smashing the ground full of big holes. A breeze blew, and a charred smell of meat that had been roasted for a long time gently drifted over. Tang In and the people who stuck their heads out of the warehouse behind him had their expressions frozen as they stared at this scene in a daze. These pitiful heavy soldiers came all the way here and did nothing. They were all killed just by posing. It was really tragic. He was unwilling, but who could he blame? Perhaps they could only blame the officer in the tactics department of the Zechen Legion for giving out random suggestions out of boredom. Now, it was certain that the officer had not checked all the information in detail. If he knew that the Grey Coat Army had such a powerful weapon like Mjolnir, he would definitely not have given such a brainless suggestion to block the road. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of hurried footsteps could be heard. Hiss. The soldiers who finally caught up to them saw the scene in front of them and were shocked. What kind of joke was this? Were these lumps of heavy soldiers known to have the strongest defense on land? Then they shifted their gazes to the right. Tang and also came back to his senses at this time. He turned around, and the two sides faced each other. Tang and shrugged, smiled, and kicked. Bang! The long metal barrel was kicked to the left. Mjolnir? Retreat, retreat quickly. God! When they came to their senses, the group of soldiers instantly collapsed. Amidst all kinds of exclamations, the crowd surged and rushed to the path where they came from. They threw away all their shields and swords. They only regretted that their parents did not give them more legs. Fall, run, roll, crawl. In just a few seconds, the path in front of Tang Un was cleared. TSK, this speed? These soldiers were also shocked by the tragic scene just now. Not to mention that there were no more explosive crystals. Even if there were, they were only a dozen meters away from Tang In now. They could not even reach the shortest range of Mjolnir. Let's go. Tang In waved his hand. Everyone ran out of the warehouse with smiles on their faces. The scene just now was indeed very joyous. Whoosh bang. Darren put away his flashing red sword and looked at the cracked metal box with a complicated expression. Then he sighed and ordered everyone to retreat. The area of the mountain pass had been widened quite a bit. In the middle, there was a deep crater. Needless to say, this was the center of the explosion. At the same time, this was also the place where the smell of burnt meat was the strongest. Dawn at dawn, beside a small mountain stream, a large group of people fell on the ground. Splash. After washing his face with cold water in the stream, Tang In quivered and immediately became more energetic. Not long after they broke out of the encirclement last night, those soldiers caught up again. The terrain in the north of the valley was indeed complicated. There were all kinds of hills, ravines, and narrow mountain paths. The Grey Coat Army relied on their familiarity with the terrain and traveled quickly for an entire night. Under normal circumstances, they would have shaken them off by now. However, after the battle last night, the number of injured and sick people in the team had greatly increased, which slowed down their speed. In the end, they were still left behind by the pursuing soldiers. Under such circumstances, they continued until dawn. Estimating that it was time for the group of soldiers to eat, the Gray Coat Army took a short break. Beside the mountain stream, some women were starting a fire to cook. Fortunately, they went into the warehouse last night and took some things. Otherwise, breakfast would have been a problem for everyone. On the other side of the mound, there were simple stretchers with many seriously injured people lying on them. Josiah was there to help, comforting them softly. He was slightly clumsy as he applied medicine and changed the bandages. He seemed to be very serious. Those who were being taken care of responded submissively, and all of them were a little unnatural. He was a noble magician, and now he was treating his wounds. Next to the injured were the current fresh troops of the Gray Coat Army. There were about 250 of them, and they were seizing the time to rest. Tang Yin silently calculated. This Gray Coat Army that originally had 500 people was now less than 400. The future was not very bright, Tang. Josiah walked over with a small bottle and a clean white cloth. How are your injuries? As she spoke, she did not dare to look into Tang Yin's eyes. Last night, in her agitation, she had taken the initiative to kiss Tang Yin. Now that she thought about it, she only felt her face burning. I'm fine. Tang Yin wiped the water off his face and smiled. He was no longer the otaku from before. Under the stimulation of the systematic training and blood energy, he felt like he was about to mutate. He had suffered some minor external injuries in the red whirlwind last night, but they had healed on their own. As for his internal injuries, they had to be treated slowly. He could feel that they were slowly recovering. That's good. Josiah patted his chest and heaved a sigh of relief. Then he passed the bottle over and said, "Here, this is what Mrs. Megan asked me to pass to you. It's helpful for your internal injuries." "Thank you." Tang Yin took it. It was probably some elixir for treating internal injuries. It shouldn't be too advanced. Where's the injury on your hand?" Josiah asked in surprise. Last night, when she used the entanglement of water to pull Tang Yin back, she could clearly see many small wounds. "It's healed." Josiah blinked and had a puzzled look on his face. "Brother Arthur." Tang Yin turned his head and saw Darren and Borg walking over. Darren's shoulder was bandaged with a piece of gray cloth, and he seemed to have suffered some minor injuries. However, he didn't mind. He raised his injured hand and greeted Tang Yin. Borg wasn't injured, but he wasn't in good spirits. It was his idea to break through the encirclement in the north last night, but he just happened to fall into the trap. Actually, no one in the Gray Coat Army blamed him. After all, the north was indeed the best choice. However, Borg, who had been going smoothly, felt a little defeated. He was very dissatisfied with himself. Darren walked over and suddenly bowed deeply. "Brother Arthur, thank you. If it wasn't for you last night, we would have really died." Tang Yin was stunned. He hurriedly helped Darren up. "What are you doing?" "I was also in the encirclement. I was just running for my life." Darren stood up and laughed heartily. "You should thank me. If Brother Arthur joins the Gray Coat Army, I really want to give you the position of team leader." Tang Yin and Josiah were shocked. Borg, on the other hand, was stunned. Tang Yin hurriedly waved his hand and smiled bitterly. "Uncle Darren, don't joke about this. If you put it that way, I wouldn't dare to join even if I wanted to." Now, everyone in this team knew that Tang Yin was the most powerful. In this alternate world, the strong were respected. Hence, Darren wasn't completely joking when he said that. He was probably testing Yongling. If Tang Yin really joined the Gray Coat Army, based on Darren's character, he would immediately give up the position of team leader. However, Tang Yin really didn't want to be a team leader. It was important to know one's own limits. Having good skills didn't mean everything was good. For example, when they first met the heavy armored soldiers last night, Darren stood up in time to boost everyone's morale and fight to the death. That was something that Tang Yin couldn't do. If it were him, he would only rush up without saying a word. He was obviously not cut out to be a leader. Darren saw that Tang Yin really didn't want to be a team leader, so he didn't force him. After all, Tang Yin wasn't a member of the Gray Coat Army. Then, everyone discussed the problem of the escape route. Borg was usually in charge of this. However, after the defeat last night, Borg was much more cautious. He pulled everyone together and started discussing. The leaders of the Grey Coat Army had told them about this problem when the team was broken up. Now that the first hiding spot had been destroyed, Darren and the rest should move to the backup hiding spot. However, the key now was how to shake off the soldiers behind them. Otherwise, it would be useless no matter where they ran. Borg now thought that the commander of the soldiers behind him was the one who saw through his intention to break out, so he designed a rather complicated escape route and plan. However, after discussing for a while, Borg realized that he had been blinded. Darren was only in charge of executing the plan and didn't care about anything else. Tangen didn't know much about this. If it was about escaping alone, he was an expert. Josiah was a beginner, so he naturally couldn't give any constructive suggestions. Hence, in the end, the plan didn't change at all. Everyone hurriedly set off after breakfast, preparing to begin their great escape. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 128. An army pursuit was different from an individual pursuit. There were many tricks involved. As long as one was fast enough, one would be able to catch up. An army pursuit was not so simple. What was the terrain ahead? Was it suitable for the troop class to pass through? Was there an ambush? Could the logistics keep up? There were a lot of problems that needed to be solved. Therefore, if both sides moved in the same way and the terrain was slightly more complicated, the pursuit would basically become a protracted battle. It had only been half a day since the Grey Coat Army broke out of the encirclement last night, so they did not have to worry about being caught up for the time being. However, their situation was not optimistic either, because they had almost no supplies. Of course, they could not run on an empty stomach. Originally, it was not impossible to dig some plants and hunt some game in this mountain range. However, doing these things required time. Escaping was not a vacation. If they really did that, it would not be long before they were caught up. Borg knew this, and the commander chasing behind them should also know this. Therefore, the Grey Coat Army had to escape in the shortest time possible. Otherwise, they would be completely passive. This is the place where we can escape from the pursuit. Borg stood at the top of the mountain and said firmly as he pointed ahead. His hair fluttered in the strong wind. For a moment, he had the feeling of being full of energy and pointing at the world. The reason why Borg was so confident was all because of the terrain ahead. Coiling Dragon Valley. From the name, one could tell that it was a complicated place surrounded by circles. In fact, it was exactly so. From the top of the mountain, one could vaguely see the entire valley. At first glance, one could clearly see that after entering the valley, there were 3 paths that crossed the east and west ends of the valley. The middle path was slightly straight, and the 2 beside it were in an arc. Upon closer inspection, one would realize that the 3 paths were not completely separated. There were still many small paths in the middle that were connected. As a whole, it looked like a maze. The entrance and exit of the valley were not only the 2 paths that connected the end and the end of the 3 paths. There are also a few small exits on the north and south sides of the valley. Let's have lunch now and replenish our strength. Prepare for the rapid march later to widen the distance. Borg appeared to be full of confidence. In the afternoon, the Grey Coat Army entered the Coiling Dragon Valley and obtained the middle path. There was no doubt about this. Between 2 points, a straight line was the shortest. Anyone with eyes would know this. However, the Grey Coat Army's marching speed had become very strange. One moment, they would march for a few minutes, and the next moment, they would move forward slowly like a deflated balloon. At this time, someone would come out from the front of the group and shout continuously, seemingly encouraging or giving orders or something. Then, the group would rush forward again, and after a few minutes, they would be discouraged. All right. Stop walking. Slow down. Borg dragged his right leg and walked in front like a cripple. When everyone heard this, they immediately switched from sprinting to walking slowly. Borg dragged his feet and said, "The pursuer should be at the place where we ate just now. Seeing our condition, they'll definitely think that we didn't eat anything and are exhausted." Pausing for a moment, he chuckled and said, "The other side has several times more people than us, so the commander will definitely divide his troops into 3 groups. One group will chase after us, while the other 2 will rush from the side to the front to form an encirclement." Ha! When Tang In and the others heard this, they couldn't help but nod in agreement. This was a normal line of thought. Seeing the state of the target they were chasing and seeing the current terrain, it was easy to think of dividing the troops to surround them and attack from the front and back. The Greycoat army maintained this stop-and-go frequency and traveled about 2/3 of the way. Borg calculated the time and waved his hand. "All right, let's go south now." With that said, he led the way into a fork in the road. Everyone followed him. At this time, the Greycoat army was no longer half-dead like before. Instead, they were rushing forward. After walking for about half an hour, they saw a main road. Without a doubt, this should be one of the 3 paths. As expected, Borg said with a relaxed smile after he bent down to observe the road. Everyone understood what he meant. There were many scattered footprints on this mountain road. There must have been a group of soldiers rushing past. At this time, if the Greycoat army continued south for a while, they would be able to walk out of Coiling Dragon Valley through a small valley entrance. All right, let's go east now. East? Wasn't that the direction they had come from? Were they planning to catch them off guard and launch a surprise attack? Their doubts didn't last long. Borg explained, "If we go out from this exit now, the distance between us and them will be too small. It will be easy for them to follow us again. The enemy's commander is a smart person. We didn't deliberately hide our tracks, so he should have noticed that we turned south by now. What will he do then?" After pausing for a moment, he saw that everyone was looking at him. Borg smiled faintly and continued, "He will divide the troops again and chase us all the way back to the East Valley entrance to prevent us from escaping from there. But that's because we turned north halfway and returned to the middle road. Then, we will continue north and make a few small turns on the main road in the north to completely confuse them. Finally, we will break through from the North Valley entrance." Clap. Borg clapped his hands and smiled confidently. "That's it." Everyone looked at each other and raised their hands. Clap, 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 clap. The applause didn't stop for a long time. F***CK. We don't know if the soldiers are confused or not, but we are about to be confused, although they didn't completely know how many turns they had to make. Tang In roughly understood Borg's method. It was to use the difference in time and space to lead the enemy by the nose to achieve the effect of completely disrupting the enemy's command. Finally, they would break through from the north while the soldiers were in a state of disunity. At that time, the enemy wouldn't be able to catch up. Firstly, they weren't sure of the direction, and secondly, the soldiers were scattered and needed to be reorganized. By the time the enemy's commander solved these 2 problems, the Greycoat army would have long disappeared without a trace. This method sounds quite reliable. Thus, everyone followed Borg's guidance and played a game of hide-and-seek with the pursuing soldiers in the Coiling Dragon Valley. First, they went east, then turned north and returned to the middle road. Then, they continued north and came to the north road. Then, they went west, then south, then east, and then again. Sorry, I'm going to faint if I write anymore. Let's replace it with an ellipsis. You guys are also dizzy. Don't blame the raccoon and despise Borg. At this time, everyone was completely dizzy. Those with a poor sense of direction even lost their sense of direction. Borg, on the other hand, was in good spirits. His logic was very clear, and he was very decisive when it came to going straight and turning. All right, just one more turn, and we can break through. Everyone's spirits lifted when they heard that. F***CK. We've finally reached the end. Borg walked quickly in front and turned. When everyone turned around, they saw a group of soldiers walking out from the opposite side of the path. When both sides met, they were instantly stunned. What was going on? This doesn't make sense, Borg muttered. When he came back to his senses, he turned his head and shouted, "The rear army has changed to the front army. Go straight ahead and turn left. Quick, quick!" It wasn't difficult to command and dispatch a team of hundreds of people. Hearing the order, the Greycoat army turned around and rushed back the way they came. "Don't run, kill." When the group of soldiers saw them turn around and run, they immediately came back to their senses and chased after them while waving their big swords. Go straight, turn left. Ugh. The person at the front of the group suddenly stopped in his tracks. What's going on? Let's go. Borg ran up from behind and shouted anxiously. Then, he turned and saw another group of soldiers in front of him. Both sides were staring at each other. Impossible. Borg grabbed his hair and kept shaking his head, looking like he couldn't accept it. He roared, "Why are you here?" Borg was also confused by his anxiety. After he couldn't figure it out, he directly questioned the other party. The captain of the soldiers on the other side was already a little stunned. When he heard such a rational and strong roar, he subconsciously stood up straight. "Reporting, sir, we're lost." Awkward silence. The truth was revealed. All of Borg's calculations were based on one foundation. The other party's commander was the smart person who had seen through the direction of his escape last night. Smart people tended to think too much. When dealing with Borg's tactics, they would think left and right and send people to chase after and intercept the Grey Coat Army. But in fact, the commander who was chasing them was of average quality. At first, he could still follow Borg's train of thought, so he was led by Borg for a period of time. Later on, his mind was a mess, and he completely crashed. After those scattered soldiers didn't receive orders from the higher-ups for a long time, they acted on their own and wandered around randomly. Who knew that they would accidentally run into the Grey Coat Army? Borg was too smart, but in the end, he fell into his own hands. It had to be said that this was a complete tragedy. Phew! Darren let out a long breath. Which way is north? Borg pointed in a direction in a daze. Break out. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 129. The Undulating Mountain Range and the Winding Mountain Road. The team of a few hundred people formed a long line. Their speed was not slow, but the atmosphere was a little gloomy. All of them lowered their heads and hurried on, looking a little disheartened. These people were the Grey Coat Army that had just broken out of the Coiling Dragon Valley. Although Borg's plan had failed due to some ridiculous reasons, at least the scattered soldiers had been dispersed. But at least the pursuing soldiers were indeed scattered. So when they broke through the encirclement, they only encountered some small forces and were quickly defeated in a narrow path. At this time, the enemy's commander was still trying hard to sort out his thoughts in the middle of the valley and did not manage to surround them in time. Hence, the Grey Coat Army managed to break out of the encirclement. However, although they had successfully broken out of the encirclement, they did not feel happy at all because they knew that the pursuers were definitely still behind them. After going in such a big circle and paying the price of some casualties, they still could not get rid of the pursuers. This was indeed depressing. What was worse was that they were completely in a passive position now. When they broke out of the encirclement in the valley last night, they only brought 1 day's worth of rations, which meant that if they ate another meal, they would face the predicament of starvation. When that time came, they might not even need to be surrounded by the pursuers, as they might collapse on their own. As they moved forward silently, the atmosphere of the team became more and more solemn. Seeing this, Darren immediately ordered a temporary rest when they passed by a small hill. After all, if this situation continued, there was no guarantee that something would happen. Then, Darren called Tang In, Josiah, Borg, and Megan over to urgently discuss how to deal with this situation. After gathering, the few of them were a little quiet. Tangan looked around. Josiah looked very anxious, and she bit her lips tightly. It was obvious that she wanted to say something encouraging. Mrs. Megan was in charge of the logistics of the entire team, so her expression was naturally worse. Borg was a little absent-minded, as if he had not woken up from the blow of the tactical failure. Ahem. Darren coughed twice to attract everyone's attention. Everyone, what should we do now? I'm sorry. After a moment of silence, Borg bowed and said, It's all because of my mistaken command that caused everyone to be like this. All right, Borg, this is not all your fault. Darren shook his head. Your plan was already very good. When that happened, I can only say, I I can only say that you're too unlucky. Tang sighed inwardly as he finished Darren's sentence. That was indeed the case. Borg could be said to be a smart person. It was not easy for him to apply the knowledge he had learned in the aristocratic school and achieve a few small victories. If he could continue to train, he might be able to become a famous general in time. Just as Darren had said, his plan this time was already very good. But who would have thought that the enemy's commander seemed to have changed into a completely different person? At first, he was sharp enough to see where they were going to break out of the encirclement, but later on, his brain went blank. The change was just too fast. Yes, Borg, it's not all your fault. We're also responsible. With everyone comforting him, Borg looked much better. At this time, the atmosphere had also eased, and everyone began to discuss the current situation. Needless to say, the issue of food was always the top priority. This Greycoat army only had a few days of comfort when they succeeded in the previous robbery. For the rest of the time, they were worried about this. Now, the situation was even more serious. They were deep in the mountains and forests, there was no way to trade, and hunting was too slow. Darren pounded his palms anxiously. Damn it, I really want to rob another supply team. Of course, this was said in anger. Not to mention that there were no supply teams passing by. Even if there were, with the current strength of the Greycoat army, they could only watch helplessly. However, Tang En's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He looked behind and said thoughtfully, robbery. When the others saw Tang En's reaction, they couldn't help but look behind as well. The Greycoat army was resting behind them. Naturally, they wouldn't be the target of the robbery. As for the people behind, Darren opened his mouth. Arthur, you mean none of them were stupid? Everyone understood that Tang En had set his sights on the pursuers. Borg shook his head and said, every commander will be on high alert when it comes to food. It's impossible to smuggle it away under their noses. Tang En narrowed his long and narrow eyes. What if I don't smuggle it away? Borg was indeed a smart person. After being stunned for a moment, his eyes lit up. You mean burn it? Burn it. Everyone was stunned. Darren clapped his hands. Yes, we can't leave without food. If they don't have it, they won't be able to catch up. Everyone's interest was completely piqued. At first, they were always thinking about where to get food. Tang was an assassin and also a bandit. He thought of this method to harm others without benefiting himself. However, although he had a method, it wasn't that easy to implement. Borg hesitated. It's easier to burn it than to steal it, but it's too difficult for us to break into the enemy's camp. Moreover, the area of the food isn't small. If the fire is small, it's easy to put it out. Borg was familiar with military affairs. After all, he quickly pointed out the difficulties of the operation. No matter how difficult it is, we have to do it. Darren's tone was very firm. This is the most feasible method now. I'll form an assault team now. We'll burn it down, even if we have to risk our lives. Tang En smiled bitterly. Uncle Darren, don't be so impatient. Even if we burn it down, we'll do it at night. Moreover, I want to go in alone this time. It's not good to have too many people. What? Everyone was shocked. I don't agree. Josiah was the first to object. He said fiercely, this is too dangerous. If we're discovered, you won't be able to come out. F***CK? Tang En couldn't help but roll his eyes. I haven't done it yet. Can't you hope for something good? This isn't about whether it's good or not. I don't agree either. Darren and Megan objected one after another. Borg said, yes, Arthur. Even if you can go in, how much can you burn? It wasn't strange that everyone objected. The military camp wasn't like other places. Once they were exposed, they would be surrounded. With Tang En's current strength, there was absolutely no chance of survival. It shouldn't be a problem for me to go in. Tang En's tone was very confident. Josiah, you know my identity, don't you? I'm a professional. Josiah was stunned. Then he bit his lips. But even so, Tang En waved his hand and stopped her from speaking. He continued, my strength is indeed limited. However, if everyone continues to feign attacks outside and buy me time, we should still be able to burn it down. Josiah lowered his head and remained silent. Don't worry. I'm confident. I'm also very afraid of death. Tang Yin shrugged and smiled. At this moment, the other three people didn't know what to say. They all turned to look at Josiah. After a while, Josiah muttered, Arthur should be able to go in. Finally, you said something good. Ha! It's settled then. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it, Chi Dian. Come. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 130. When the wind is strong and the fire is set, when the moon is dark, it is time to kill. The general meaning of this sentence was to tell people that they had to wait for the dark to do bad things. Now that Tang Yin was planning to set the fire, the Gray Coat Army was also preparing to kill. So in the evening, the team found a place to camp early, and then they ate and waited for the dark. Tang Yin walked to the lee of a hill and looked up at the sky. The weather during the day was good, so it should not be dark at night. Fortunately, the cold wind in the north did not stop at all times, so it did not affect the movement. Tang, it's time to eat. Josiah came over with a lunchbox. Tang Yin looked at the lunchbox with a little surprise. Usually, there was only one bowl. Josiah sat down beside Tang Yin and opened the wooden box. There were 2 bowls of rice, a plate of meat slices, and a soup jar with half a chicken. This is... Tang Yin was shocked. He knew the current situation of the Gray Coat Army. The chicken and the meat slices should be the last meat. You're going to do something tonight, so Mrs. Megan asked me to send it over, Josiah explained. There's no need to do this. Tang Yin touched his forehead. What does this mean, the last dinner? Why does it feel like the wind is blowing and the water is cold? This is everyone's good intentions. Well, eat it while it's hot. Mrs. Megan's cooking is very good. Well, you eat too. Tang Yin had to pick up the bowl of rice. Well, Tang, you must be careful this time. If you really can't do it, come out quickly. We can think of other ways. Josiah took 2 sips of rice and finally could not help but remind him. Haha, don't worry. You know what I do? This kind of thing isn't difficult for me. Well, if I have time, I'll kill that commander while I'm at it. Ha! Tang Yin waved the spoon and said nonchalantly. Ha! Josiah forced a laugh and lowered his head. Actually, if I didn't keep you here out of selfishness, you wouldn't have encountered such a thing. Tang Yin raised his head and saw Josiah burying his head in his long hair. Why are you talking about this? Come on, I'm a loyal person. Since you saved me, I'll definitely help you. No, it's not like that. Josiah said a few words in a low voice. Then he raised his head and shouted with reddened eyes, Although I saved you, you helped us kill the captain of the supply team. Then you saved little Helen and helped everyone break out of the encirclement. Now you're going to do such a dangerous thing. You've already paid off your debt. It's all because of me. I thought you were very smart and would be helpful to the Gray Coat Army. I wanted to keep you. It's all my selfishness. It's all my selfishness. Tang Yin looked at the suddenly agitated Josiah. He kept his smile and fell silent. Sigh, you said you wanted to keep me here out of selfishness. Actually, if I didn't say so much in the library in Lian City and instill so many thoughts in you, how would you have made the decision to come to the north to find the Gray Coat Army so quickly? If you didn't meet me, maybe after a few years when you got married and had children, these thoughts would have faded after waiting for Josiah to calm down. Tang and let out a long sigh. Selfishness? That's what you think. He stood up. Let's go and find Uncle Darren. What? You want to join the Gray Coat Army now? Darren opened his mouth in shock. Why am I not welcome? Tang and spread his hands. How can that be? Darren threw away his bowl in joy. Wait for me. I'll go and arrange it now. Josiah stood at the side in a daze. Tang and waved his hand to stop him. Don't think too much. I'm doing this willingly. At this moment, Darren carried a stone over and placed a bowl on it. Then he called the Gray Coat Army members over. Brother Arthur, please drip a drop of blood into the bowl. Drip blood? Damn, why does it feel like I'm joining a mafia? Although he complained, Tang Yin still took a drop of blood and put it into the bowl. Josiah, drip a drop of blood in too, Darren continued. Tang Yin was stunned. What did this have to do with her? Josiah opened his mouth slightly. Didn't you say that you wanted to be Arthur's referral? The referral needs to drip a drop of blood too. Darren explained. Josiah nodded. She took a small knife and cut her finger. A drop of blood fell into the bowl. Tangan looked at the 2 drops of blood mixed together. He couldn't help but touch his nose. This was going to be a blood test. Then Mrs. Megan poured the clear water into the bowl. The blood disappeared instantly, and the water turned slightly yellow. You guys could just share this bowl. All right, I knew it would be like this. Tang twitched his mouth. He took the bowl and drank half of it. Then he passed the bowl over and smiled. Comrade Josiah, we'll be on the same team from now on. So what I did before was what I should do. Please take care of me in the future. Josiah looked at Tang in a daze. He was a little hesitant. I already said that I'm doing this willingly. And you won't let me keep holding up like this, right? There are so many people here, at least give me some face. Josiah finally couldn't help but laugh. He laughed until tears came out. He took the bowl and drank it all. Darren shouted loudly, "Good. I announced that Brother Arthur has officially joined the Gray Coat Army." Clap, clap, clap. The applause was thunderous and endless. Everyone knew about Tang's ability. It could be said that he could do well no matter where he was. But he chose to join the Gray Coat Army at such a special time. How could everyone not be moved and admire him? Darren pressed his palms together and waited for the applause to stop. Then he said to Josiah seriously, "Drink this bowl of blood water. If Arthur betrays us, as the person who introduced him, you have to be responsible for hunting him down until you die." Tang and Josiah looked at each other with strange expressions. Darren turned around and said sincerely, "Brother Arthur, I'm sorry. This is just a process that we have to go through. Please don't take it to heart." "It's okay, I understand." Tang shrugged. Then he patted Josiah's shoulder and said earnestly, "Your mission is very important. Comrade Josiah, kill an assassin? What a joke. I'll do my best." Josiah said seriously, "Now, register Brother Arthur's name in the book." Darren waved his hand and said. Madam Megan took out a stapled book and was about to write it down. "Oh, wait, write Tang in. My surname is Arthur, and my name is Tang in. Everyone will call me Tang in the future." Tang laughed dryly. "Ha!" Josiah snickered at the side. Late at night, the dark moon hung high in the sky, and the cold wind whistled. A few black figures quietly crept up to the peak of a mountain. They stuck their heads out and looked at the sparks in the distance. This idiot is pretty good at setting up camp. Ha ha, Borg, you'd better hurry up and find the location of Brother Arthur's, Tang's rations. Needless to say, these people were Tang and the others. To set the fire, they had to first determine the location of the rations. Naturally, they couldn't go in and look for it. So, they climbed up the mountain closest to the other party's camp to observe it. Tang and Darren naturally couldn't see anything. In their eyes, the camp in the distance seemed to be the same everywhere. But Bohr was different. He was also a commander and had done research on troop arrangements, setting up camp, and choosing locations. He could see something. After a while, Bohr pointed out the 2 places where the rations were most likely to be placed for Tang. Then, the few of them went down the mountain. After discussing the matter of feigning an attack, Tang disappeared into the night alone. There aren't many words in today's chapter, but it took a long time to write. After editing, it was actually past midnight. There are always book friends who say that there's something wrong with Civet's logic. For example, killing Bevan in the past and helping Josiah now. Let me explain. When Civet writes, there are some plots that he won't explain clearly, because some will be explained later, such as helping Josiah. There are also some that he really won't write, such as the reason for killing Bevan. Because it's easy to think, explaining too much will more or less make the reading experience lose, occupying the space of the reader's imagination. Alright, that's all for now. This chapter originally cost more than $2,000, so adding these didn't cost much. Everyone, good night, sweet dreams. Carrot, to be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 131. There was a small forest in the south of the barracks. The trees were sparse, and the sound of insects could be heard. More than 10 spear-wielding soldiers walked through the forest in a line. Occasionally, when they encountered a large bush, they would thrust their spears into it. If there was no response, they would continue to patrol forward. There were 3 or 4 such squads in the forest. After they had combed through the forest, they would turn to the west. Soon after, other squads of soldiers patrolling from other places would enter the forest again, and the cycle would repeat. There was a rather tall bush in the middle of the forest. At this time, a group of soldiers walked over and did not dare to be negligent. The squad leader waved his hand to disperse the group. More than 10 soldiers stood side by side and thrust their spears into the bush. After the inspection, there was no movement. Suddenly, a black figure flashed behind them and stuck to the top of the tree trunk. The group of soldiers did not notice and continued to move forward under the leadership of the squad leader. The figure breathed a sigh of relief and stuck his head out. The long and narrow eyes under the mask habitually squinted. It was Tang In. Although Tang In acted indifferent when chatting with Josiah, as if going in and out of the barracks was like strolling in his own backyard. In fact, he knew the difficulty of this mission. The barracks were not like the houses of nobles. The field of vision here was wide, and the patrols were strict. It was very difficult to sneak in silently. Although the commander's reaction was a little slow and he lacked quick-wittedness, it did not mean that he was not good in other aspects. The layout of the barracks in front of him was very good. The entire structure was built against the mountains, and the terrain was quite high. The west side of the barracks was an open area. As long as there was someone guarding here, the possibility of a frontal attack was eliminated. In the north was a gully and mountain stream. It was a natural stronghold and close to a water source. It was really an excellent terrain. The only flaw was in the south, where Tang Un was in the sparse forest. There was no other way. How could a temporary camp in the mountains be perfect? In addition to the location of the barracks, the interior of the barracks was well equipped with fences, simple wooden walls, small observation towers, and so on. The marching tents were placed layer by layer and linked to each other, surrounding the largest white tent in the center. As a whole, it looked like an iron bucket. This way, not only could he protect the commander who lived in the center, but it was also convenient for him to give orders. No wonder Borg, who had a lot of resentment towards the commander, had to admit that the layout of the camp was really good. However, no matter how complicated the lock was, it would eventually be opened. Although the defense of this camp was tight, it did not mean that there was no chance at all. Tang In observed for a while. After figuring out the patrolling pattern, he decisively began to sneak in. He dodged to the side and hid behind a tree. The patrol team on the left had already passed by, and the next team would arrive in 3 minutes. Turn left, move forward quickly, lie prone. Tang In drifted from east to west in the forest like a ghost, constantly moving forward. Every smooth movement contained keen observation and careful logic. Tang In was really not good at commanding in the big picture, and he did not have that talent. However, he was not afraid of anyone when it came to precise control over a small area. After passing over a group of soldiers like a ghost, Tang In finally made his way to the edge of the forest. F***CK. He cursed softly. Tang In could not see clearly when he was far away. Now that he was in front of the forest, he could see that there was still some distance between the forest and the camp. There should have been trees here, but now they were all bare tree stumps. Obviously, they must have been sawed off after the camp was set up to form an open space without any obstructions. What should I do? It was definitely not possible to force his way in. It was dozens of meters away. No matter how fast he was, he would still be seen by the soldiers on the lookout in front. The next patrol team would arrive in a few minutes. It was also not possible to stay in the same place. Tang In suddenly found himself in a dilemma. Tap, tap, tap. Tang In turned his head and saw a group of soldiers coming out of the forest to the left, heading towards the camp. Oh no, this team went back. The next batch should be here. Go back. Tang In's heart suddenly moved. Is this okay? Damn it, I'll take the risk. After decisively making the decision, Tang In rushed to the left. As he moved forward, his body emitted a light, crackling sound. He instantly became shorter by half, like a dwarf. He threw off his shoes, tied up his clothes, took out his dagger, and cut his pants. In a few seconds, Tang In caught up with the last soldier coming out of the forest. He silently stuck to the back and moved forward. The soldier on the lookout looked over. Everything was normal. He then turned his head back. If his line of sight was not from the side, but from the top, he would see that behind the last soldier, there was a little person in black following him step by step. Very good. You can't see me. You can't see me. Tang In held his breath and followed like a ghost. The soldier in front did not feel anything and continued to move forward normally. This was undoubtedly a very strange scene. If the soldier accidentally turned his head, he would definitely be scared silly. Of course, at that time, he would also be instantly killed by Tang In. The camp was getting closer and closer. The danger was far from over. Because as the soldiers got closer, the angle of the lookout became wider until they finally saw Tang In following them. This was unavoidable. Tang In's figure would definitely be exposed in those few seconds. He could only gamble now. He gambled that the soldier on the lookout would not look over in those few seconds. Closer, even closer, it's coming. Tang and had already seen the soldier on the lookout from the corner of his eyes. Similarly, if the other party turned his head, he would definitely see him. The camp was close. 10 steps, 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Don't move, be good. This was neither like a special ability nor a lullaby. Naturally, it would not affect others. The neck of the soldier on the lookout moved slightly and turned his head subconsciously. Damn it! Tang did not have time to think carefully. He stepped sideways and slid behind the wooden wall of the camp. In an instant, the soldier on the lookout turned his head again. Phew! Tang let out a long breath. Suddenly, his hair stood on end. He shrank his head and rolled back. The last soldier stopped, turned his head, and looked behind him in confusion. When Tang In slid just now, his baggy clothes still made a slight sound of the wind. Behind the soldier was a simple wooden wall. He was now only a few steps away from Tang In. Step. The soldier took a step back. Tang In had nowhere to retreat now. If he retreated, he would be exposed to the sight of the soldier on the lookout. His long and narrow eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned forward, and the dagger slipped out of his sleeve. What's wrong? Nothing. There seemed to be a sound just now. Here? It's the sound of the wind. Let's go, let's go. Damn it, I'm so sleepy. I can finally change shifts. Oh. The soldier turned and chased after him. What the F***CK? You scared your father to death. Tang In wiped his sweat, still in shock. After a while, he stuck his head out. It was quiet. Except for those who had a mission, most of the other soldiers were asleep. Naturally, there were also patrols in the camp. The intensity was not weaker than that of the periphery. After observing for a while, Tang In silently memorized the route and pattern of the patrols. He got up and sneaked into the camp. Although the defense inside and outside was equally tight, there were still some shelters, tents, and some simple wooden huts used as toilets. These objects made it easy for Tang In to hide. Soon, Tang In came to the north of the camp. According to Borg's speculation, the provisions should be in the east and north of the camp. After observing for a while, Tang In shook his head in disappointment. The sound of snoring in the tents here was constant. Obviously, these were the resting places of the soldiers. TSK. It seems to be in the east, behind the whole camp. Tang In thought for a while and was about to get up. Suddenly, whoosh, the curtain was lifted and a figure appeared in front of him. Tang In's scalp instantly went numb, and a chill ran up his spine. His body's subconscious reaction was faster than his thoughts, and the dagger instantly popped out. The armored soldier did not seem to notice Tang In at all. He staggered forward a few steps as if he had not woken up and entered a wooden house. That was the toilet. F***CK. Tang In's face was gloomy as he walked toward the wooden hut. He entered. There was a muffled groan and the sound of bones moving. After a while, the soldier. Oh, it was Tang In who had recovered his body. wearing the soldier's armor, and walked out. Not taking off your armor at night. Did you expect us to sneak up on you? Tang shook his head, tidied up his clothes, and headed east. As for the soldier, as you know, the toilet can only hide people in the toilet. It was forbidden to wander around at night in the camp, so don't think that you can swagger around while wearing armor. However, wearing the soldier's armor was part of Tangen's plan. Now that he had encountered this person who wanted to die, he naturally took it off. When Tangen got to the back of the camp, he instantly knew where the provisions were, because there was a small team of more than 10 people guarding the door. Tangen smacked his lips. Sigh, you're forcing me to go on a killing spree again. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 132. Gurgle. In the wee hours of the morning, the low sound of a bugle broke the silence of the night. The camp was in an uproar. There were sounds of armor clashing, orders being shouted, and swords being unsheathed. In a short time, the soldiers were chased out of their tents by their captains and rushed to their defensive positions. They're finally here. Who's blowing the bugle? What's the situation now? Where's the attack coming from? A series of questions came from a middle-aged man who walked out of the central tent. He wore a bronze helmet, bright silver armor, and held a broadsword in his hand. He was dressed like this and came from here. Needless to say, this must be the commander of this group of soldiers. Sir, it's from the north. North? How is that possible? The middle-aged commander was stunned and said, Did you see them rushing over? The north was a ravine with a large depression. It was a natural danger zone. Of course, it wasn't that they couldn't cross it, but the risk was too high. If they wanted to rush over, they had to enter the ravine first. Once they entered the ravine, if they were discovered, the enemy only needed a few rows of archers to shoot them down. No, the enemy shot a dozen arrows. But the forest over there is a little strange. The middle-aged commander frowned and waved his hand. Let's go and take a look. After a while, the middle-aged commander came to the north of the camp. At this time, there were wooden planks placed to block the arrows. The soldiers gathered, and a few groups of archers pointed their arrows at the sky. Next to the camp, there was a ravine that was 20 feet wide and 50 feet deep. Opposite, it was a dense forest. At this time, the trees inside were rustling, as if there were many people moving inside. At this time, a torch was thrown into the ravine, and the light suddenly shone. Although it was only for a few seconds, everyone could see clearly that there was no one below except for the flowing stream. What do these gray-clothed, lowly people want? After thinking for a while, the middle-aged commander waved his hand. Since he couldn't figure it out, he would test it. Whoosh, 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 the spinning arrows whistled towards the forest with the sound of death. Swish, swish, thud, thud. After a round of arrow rain, the sound of leaves and wood being nailed could be heard from the forest. However, that was all there was to it. There were no screams or screams that were pleasing to the ear. Whoosh! Even after the rain of arrows stopped, the trees continued to tremble as usual, completely unaffected by the rain of arrows. The middle-aged commander frowned. He felt that something was wrong. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. There was a bright light behind him, followed by the sound of arrows piercing through the air. Everyone suddenly turned around and saw many fiery dragon-like things appear in the sky to the south of the campsite, attacking the interior of the campsite. Damn it! Create a diversion. The middle-aged commander angrily cursed as he waved his heavy sword. 3 large groups of infantry advanced with shields, cover the archers, and suppress them. The rest of you, quickly put out the fire. To the south of the camp, several hundred members of the Gray Coat Army stood in the forest, continuously shooting arrows. In front of them was a simple bunker made of dozens of big trees. Just now, when the soldiers' attention was attracted to the north, the Gray Coat Army quickly killed a few patrol teams and took the opportunity to force their way here. With so many rockets, it's enough to make them suffer. Needless to say, this heroic voice was definitely Darren's. Yes, hurry up and shoot. The opponent's counterattack is coming soon. TSK, TSK. Look at the reaction of those soldiers just now. They're obviously guarding against our sneak attack. Board chuckled. Shoot over there. The tents are the densest there. Darren directed, then turned around and said, It's useless to guard against it. Didn't they still take the bait? That slow idiot. Board pursed his lips in disdain. Obviously, he was still brooding over the coiling Dragon Valley incident. Darren laughed, then looked into the campsite and sighed. It's up to Brother Tang now. Tang will definitely succeed. Josiah walked over with a determined tone. Yes, with Brother Tang's skills, it shouldn't be a problem. Darren nodded, then glared at everyone and scolded. Idiots, aren't there still tents that haven't been lit? Shoot over there. Captain Darren, we can't reach there, a young man said pitifully. Darren looked at the bow and arrow and was speechless. Darren had been fighting for so many years, so of course, he could judge the shooting range of the bow and arrow. The tents that hadn't been lit were only 500 feet away from here. If it was a standard bow and arrow, they would naturally be able to reach it. However, looking at the weapons in the Gray Coat Army's hands, they were all soft wooden sticks and bows that were temporarily bent with thick thread. They were so simple and shabby. As for the arrows, they were even worse. Due to the urgency of the situation, almost none of them were straight. There was no need to think about metal arrowheads. Fortunately, they were attacking with fire now, so they could just tie a bunch of burning dry grass to it. If it didn't take that away, the arrows wouldn't be able to hurt anyone at all. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Yo, the counterattack is coming. Brothers, quickly hide. Darren lowered his body and crouched behind the tree trunk as cover. Just as the Gray Coat Army was working hard to send the rockets into the campsite, Tangon's side also started to move. At the back of the campsite, at the entrance of the granary. Who's there? A soldier on guard quickly raised his spear and pointed forward. It's me. It was a very versatile answer. Then, an armored soldier with a face full of soot ran over and said hurriedly, Quick, quick, go and put out the fire. Put out the fire? Yes, there's not enough manpower in front. The fire is almost reaching the main tent. That soldier ran closer and closer. That's impossible. How can the fire be so big? The soldier looked at the fire in front of him, then said warily, You're running so fast. Stop right there. Stop your *SS. My image is ruined. After tossing out a string of inexplicable words, Tang In finally ran across the open space. Then he suddenly sprinted forward, and the remaining few feet were covered in an instant. Before that soldier could warn him, a red light flashed in front of him. Chaotic flower. That soldier's vision suddenly blurred, and he saw the red light rapidly expand, forming something that looked like a nut core. Then, a trace of bloody light broke out from the core, and it spun and bloomed. Large patches of bloody leaves and enchanting bloody flowers appeared realistically in front of him. That soldier even smelled something. It wasn't the fragrance of flowers, but the faint smell of blood. Hiss, 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 as if proving that beautiful things were always fragile. The spinning bloody flowers suddenly collapsed, and large patches of leaves and petals enveloped them. Hiss! In a narrow space, there were muffled cries, groans, and screams. The bloody light of the sword exploded. The 8 people in front were instantly hit. Their bodies trembled violently, and blood gushed out of dozens of wounds like fountains. The 2 people standing at the back were lucky to escape because they were far away and there were people in front of them blocking them. At this moment, their eyes were wide open, and their faces were full of horror. Enemy! Before the 2 of them could finish their warning, Tang In, who was brandishing his sword, glanced over. The chill suddenly dropped, and the 2 soldiers only felt their bodies turn cold. They froze on the spot, and the sound they wanted to shout disappeared in their throats. Fortunately, this feeling only lasted for a moment, and the 2 soldiers quickly regained control of their bodies. However, it was too late to shout now. Hiss, hiss, 2 sounds of wind whistling, but the sound that they didn't make was forever stuck in their throats. Although a lot was said, in reality, from the moment Tang an attack to the end, it only took a few seconds. Looking at the bloodstains on the ground, Tang In smacked his lips. As expected, it's good to have a high level of skills. TSK, ISK, this proficiency in chaotic flowers, this mastery of killing intent. Shaking his head, Tang In pushed open the door of the granary. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.